Chapter 1140. The Ruler. Not only did the situation inside the chessboard change, but even outside the chessboard, many people in the Abyss Palace cast their gazes over with interest. In fact, until now, for the outside world, the existence named Alistair was a mystery shrouded in clouds and mist, except for the records of events shown by the Golden Dawn that proved that such a person did exist. The rest, even those who belonged to the Abyss, were unknown. However, the information that was circulating outside was completely inconsistent. Among the visitors who went to the Land of Dreams, some said that Alistair was an old and strange man, but some said that he was a beautiful and wise woman, and some said that he was an arrogant and indifferent young man. Each one was contradictory, but each one seemed to be incomparably conclusive. At this moment, in just a few seconds, the mysterious solidifier had smoothly ascended to the throne of the ruler. Even with the help of the Golden Dawn's foundation, it was enough to stun everyone. It should be known that although the battlefield was simulated by the records of events, the records of events were necessarily transformed into information from real things. There was absolutely no possibility of modification or cheating. If it could be done inside the chessboard, then it must be possible to reappear at any time outside the chessboard. Could this mean that the Golden Dawn had mastered some kind of ability to create a ruler in a short period of time? Now, even the muddle-headed Marcus in the wheelchair raised his eyes slightly. Soon, he seemed to understand something. The Chosen One. The diplomat sighed softly. After so many years, you really have a good card in your hand. There's also a great future in hell, isn't there? Marth replied indifferently. It's not just the present that's moving forward. For so many years, you've been obsessed with the concept of no importance. You're reluctant to part with it, but you've never looked forward. When the so-called utopia begins to be stagnant, it's only a matter of time before it's abandoned by this world. Perhaps so. The diplomat raised his head slightly and laughed, but his eyes were mocking and indifferent. Compared to the vigorous opponents, the current decrepit and old appearance is indeed embarrassing. However, please be careful. The world that you have abandoned is right in front of your eyes. At that moment, on the chessboard, the souls that had been abandoned in hell, the world that had been abandoned by the Golden Dawn, the souls that had been sacrificed roared. Roar. Even the power of the ruler was not enough to suppress this hatred. The higher the enemy stood, the more dazzling the enemy's light was, and the more intense the hatred of this inheritance was. In the darkness, the enraged monster spread its invisible wings. The light of pain appeared once again. It fell like a meteor towards the city that had overestimated itself. A storm arose out of nowhere. Thunder roared. On top of the tower, Alistair, who had been promoted to ruler, was expressionless. The book in his hand reappeared. Hoarse chanting could be heard in the wind. Unfolding the scroll of the ancient capital, stories of the past reappeared. About magic, about miracles, about a young man named Aladdin, about a mysterious oil lamp with the narration of Wanxiang. Bursts of smoke rose and transformed into a huge spirit out of thin air. Endless disasters flowed from the body of nothingness, changing constantly. Lamp God, stop them, Alistair ordered. Under the order, the spirit's scarlet eyes turned and locked onto the enemy that was descending from the sky. Then its huge body turned into a storm that rose from the ground and blocked in front of Nautilus. Accompanied by a mighty roar, the storm formed by countless blades collided with the monster. Nautilus's body suddenly shook as if it had collapsed. It evaporated silently, and wisps of dark smoke were sucked into the storm. It disappeared without a trace. In the sudden silence, the spirit's roar and cry of horror could be heard. At the center of the storm, a pitch-black wisp suddenly appeared. the monster that had been reduced to nothingness reassembled itself within the storm. The massive beast opened its mouth and greedily devoured the disaster energy and origin substance, as if it was devouring its innards from the inside out. From the middle, it tore apart the huge tornado and broke out of its abdomen with a huge amount of blood. A torrent of blood spurted out from the spirit's remnant body. In Alistair's hand, a tragic crack suddenly appeared on the ancient book. Sparse source substance flowed out from it, and it was no longer magical. And Nautilus, which fell from the sky, had smashed into the city again. The sudden increase in mass set off waves on the ground, and the sound of pages shattering could be heard incessantly. It was unknown how many secret instruments set up in this city were crushed into pieces at this moment. 1/5 of the lights were extinguished. It didn't block it. Alistair frowned slightly. In the sunken crack, Nautilus, which was embedded in the ground, flowed like water without any stagnation. It condensed again and rose into the air. It was completely unharmed. In fact, it was even more ferocious and violent than before. After a short period of running in, Huaishur had begun to gradually touch its essence. This power created by souls and source substance of hatred did not have any fixed form. It was a monster created by the hatred of the utopia and the anger in the hearts of countless solidifiers. From the moment of its birth, it was destined to devour hell, disaster, and death to live. The reason why it mimicked the appearance of Nautilus was that it had been deeply integrated with the Heavens battleship during the long battle. Therefore, it could reproduce the most terrifying state of lethality at any time. However, this didn't mean that it couldn't change into other forms: solid state, liquid state, and gaseous state. Under Huaishur's attempts, that strange state constantly changed and rotated. Gradually, as if it was skillful, there was no longer any awkwardness. It was all-pervasive. With just a moment of carelessness, Nautilus once again turned into a pitch-black storm, rolling up and engulfing the tower. In front of Alistair, in the darkness, countless iron pieces appeared out of thin air, turning into a ferocious mouth. It closed with a bang. A loud sound burst forth. In front of Alistair's raised arm, cracks appeared on the closed iron teeth. That kind of posture, the Heretic King, the same force structure as the monster-level old man who stood at the peak of martial arts, was revealed from the solidifier's body. Then, a thunderous roar spread out. A big hole was dug out in the storm formed by Nautilus with a punch. But then Alistair's arm also disintegrated and turned into ashes. The solidifier frowned slightly. It seemed to be a pity. As expected, it's just a simple rigid application. It can't be copied at all. The record he filled should be a copy of the time when the Heretic King destroyed the Green Rock Hell with a punch. However, that violent power could not be controlled at all. He could only reproduce 1 or 2/100ths of it, and it almost destroyed him. He could only stop before it was too late. Under Alistair's left shoulder, the shadow of the star coin appeared, and his arm grew out again. With the support from Edward, even the limb destroyed by the Supreme was quickly regenerating. It was flawless. The Abyss bloodline, vitro terro, the Heretic King's pure punch, and even this miraculous manipulation. In less than half a minute, he had displayed the skills that many members of the Golden Dawn were proud of. It was chilling to watch. Relying on the deep resonance with the Pseudo-Codex Book of Law, he had become one with the city under his feet. As the ruler representing the Golden Dawn, he controlled this all-encompassing authority. All the abilities of the Golden Dawn members could be reproduced through the phenomenon. Just like now, the regenerated palm, raised again, aiming at the Nautilus in the darkness. The phenomenon of nothingness gathered in the open palm and condensed into a crystal. I have understood your nature, a pure combination of origin, substance, and emotions. It is quite a good match for you. Alistair whispered softly. If that's the case, then use this book to bury you completely. The fifth element. In the blink of an eye, the sky that was filled with dark clouds suddenly collapsed. The clouds that were sprinkling the rain of decay turned into an alchemy reactor. Endless calamities surged and collided with each other, triggering a dazzling light. In the calcination of lightning and fire, the endless origin substance produced a reaction comparable to nuclear fission. Beams of condensed light tore through the reactor formed by the clouds and sprinkled down to the ground, exhausting the elements of earth, water, fire, and wind, throwing in all the elements in the world and sacrificing endless calamities in exchange for a fleeting miracle. In the core of the clouds, a bright crystal the size of a thumb quietly formed. It was the fifth element, equivalent to the Philosopher's Stone, the origin of the title of Tier 5 Ascendant. However, that unstable structure contained far too much origin substance and miraculous properties. It could not be preserved for long. The moment it was born, the purest reaction of annihilation burst out from it. Like the explosion of a star's sunspot, a magnificent destruction descended. Almost endless heat converged into a line, and a long molten needle pierced down from the clouds. Wherever it passed, the air was burned red. Dozens of kilometers away, a patch of darkness appeared on the ground. Under the illumination and urging of the intense light, even without direct contact, the monster formed by hatred began to evaporate violently. The darkness swayed and quickly thinned. But in the deepest darkness, there was a sneer. It looks awe-inspiring, but in fact, isn't it just copying? Weisher mocked back. You make it sound like no one knows how to do it. The tide of darkness suddenly boiled and pounced on the descending line of intense light. From the countless rising illusions, the figures of 12 giants appeared like windmills, and the illusion of a lone knight galloping forward. Galloping fervently, they pounced on the inevitable destruction and the inevitable end. This was the end of faith. However, on top of that torrent, in the rapidly evaporating darkness, a hard crystal rapidly emerged and reconstructed itself. Its edges and corners were ferocious. Endless hatred transformed into steel, forming the embryonic form of a majestic watchtower. In this way, the endless hatred and disaster were used as materials to fill the records of the Book of Destiny, guiding the suffering souls to form a new form again. The heavenly palace appeared. Then thunder rumbled, and a sharp sound that shook the sky, and the earth brewed between the infinite electrodes. In the distance, in the midst of the fierce battle, Ing Fangzhou's movements suddenly stopped. He ignored the enemy, who was close at hand. He turned his head to look back. Then he saw that the world seemed to have turned into darkness under the falling line of fire. But in this darkness, there was an incomparably familiar blazing light that soared into the sky. That was the thunder and lightning that belonged to Yun Zhongjuan. And what was even more familiar was the composition of it, and even the way it operated that was once unique, purification. Yun Zhongjuan sighed, softly in realization, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He had actually learned it. In fact, he was even stronger than himself, relying on the special characteristics of Nautilus. In that darkness, under the terrifying pressure of the structure of the heavenly palace, the purest quality was sublimated from the infinite quantity. In the deepest hatred, the light of revenge brewed. That was unprecedented, 26 levels of purification, even if it was only for a moment. But in this short moment, the world, the obstacles, the heat of the fifth element, and even all the defenses of the independent place were all penetrated. Everything in the world lost its color at this moment, and only the trembling outline outlined by the violent lightning was left. There was a tearing sound. It came from the spine of the Book of Law. Chapter 1141. When the destructive light of the fifth element collided with the lightning, the whole world seemed to have fallen into a dead silence. All sound was simply and violently stripped away, and the only thing that could be seen was the brilliance of the 10,000 suns colliding with each other. The waves spread, setting off a geological disaster that was comparable to moving mountains and creating continents among the fragments. The earth rose and fell, and wherever the waves passed, only dust could be seen flying up in horror, but it was evaporated by the raging light and heat in the air, disappearing without a trace. The battlefield where the ascendants were fighting was suddenly covered by the storm, and the roars of tens of thousands of people echoed in everyone's ears, shaking everyone's soul. Fusang, who was far away on the front line at the border, observed the changes throughout the entire process. They witnessed how the line of counterattacking lightning soared into the sky and increased its scale. It easily broke the destructive torrent of the fifth element and broke the line of fiery red inch by inch, allowing it to spread like blood, playing a destructive roar. And after destroying the endless obstacles and dangers, the pure lightning as pure as iron zigzagged across the sky, like a paper knife in the hands of a child, irregularly cutting through more than half of the city and the tower. The whine of the collapse was covered by the loud sound of the explosion. Everything quickly collapsed, peeled off, and dissipated like dust in the high-temperature torrent. When the blazing waves went away, in the vacuum where the air did not have time to close, there were only the broken ruins of the tower and the tragic figure at the top of the city who looked like a burnt corpse. Half of his body was clearly intact and elegant, but the places that were swept by the extremely restrained lightning were charred into a lump of charcoal. On the pitch-black half of his face, there was still a trace of shock that had not dissipated. Soon, blood gushed out like a flood. Outside the chessboard, in the dead silence, everyone fell into silence. Only on the throne of the withered king there was an untimely laughter. The Lord of Death held his potato chips and cola and praised loudly, wishing that he could offer applause for this outstanding attack. He had completely forgotten the camp he was in, or he had never cared about the rules that were not worth mentioning. From the bottom of his heart, he sincerely praised this desperate counterattack that belonged to the combatants. The diplomat lowered his eyes and did not respond. Only the corner of his mouth twitched slightly, as if he was mocking him. Marcus's expression was gloomy, but he didn't say anything. Inside the chessboard, a hoarse roar spread from the broken tower. At this moment, anger finally appeared on Alistair's broken face. In his hand, the broken book of law screeched as if it was alive. The entire city constructed from the elephant was rapidly operating. After discarding all the collapsed and destroyed secret mechanisms, a vast amount of power gathered in his hand, rapidly changing, about to unleash a world-shaking counterattack. But right after that, he saw darkness rushing towards him. There was no pause or gap. After releasing that shocking attack, he did not retreat or ease up at all. Kill him while he's down. It can't be. You don't think that someone is finished just like that, right? Amidst the rolling darkness, why sure strange, playful laughter rang out. Don't tell me that there's no one who thinks that they have to stand in place and wait for you to catch your breath after you're done, right? The mocking face loomed in the rapidly approaching darkness. So ferocious. He was clearly standing up from the ground, but his gaze was as if he was looking down from above. Cold and cynical, telling the opponent in front of him, "You're still far from it." The nautilus screeched, and the darkness shook and spread again. Fresh blood and spoils of war would not satisfy the monster. It would only make the countless solidified souls more crazy and thirst for more death for the enemy. As a result, two cold rays of light appeared once again. In the darkness that expanded to hundreds of meters high and wide, the roar of huge machinery and Huaishi's wanton laughter could be heard. Since Yun Zhongjuan's heavenly palace could be reconstructed, then even more exaggerated things should not be a problem. At that moment, impassioned melodies and hymns were played. The darkness opened up like a tide. The solemn giant god of steel spread his huge wings and rose from the deepest hell, breaking through the darkness towards the mortal world. 3 deaths could not kill him. When he closed his eyes, the underworld would tremble. When he opened his eyes, the world in front of him would play a song of triumph for him. Osiris! Impossible! At that moment, outside the chessboard, not only was Mathers shocked, but even the silent Grand Lord and the laughing withered king could not help but straighten their bodies and move closer to observe. The Archangel of Paradise clenched his halberd, unable to hide his murderous intent. The noisy whispers and curses of the jesters overlapped and spread into a clamor. But no matter how angry and doubtful the audience was, they could not stop what was happening at this moment. Osiris, the judgment machine of the underworld, had returned from hell. The burning giant sword trembled and emitted a roar that shook the heavens and the earth. The blade of Horus was pulled out of hatred and aimed at the long-awaited enemy. Slash! Alistair roared angrily, and his intact left hand and broken right hand suddenly joined together. No matter how much he doubted what was happening in front of him, there was only one choice left. Block, 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 block it for me. Layers of cliffs spread out of thin air, blocking the space between heaven and earth. In a short distance, hundreds of barriers were formed in front of the blade of Horus. Then, a terrifying sound that was enough to make anyone despair and welcome a long disability holiday spread. The barriers cracked. They were cut apart with irresistible force. 1 layer, 2 layers, 3 layers, 4 layers, 5 layers, 5 layers, 5 layers. Wait a minute. 5 layers. The blade of Horus was stuck right above the 5th layer of barriers. When he witnessed this, Alistair's furious expression froze, and he couldn't help but rejoice for a brief moment. But then it was replaced by indescribable doubt and confusion. Why was it blocked? This was the biggest question. Why was it blocked? Could this be Osiris? Was this the giant of hell? Was there something wrong with his brain? Or, right in front of his eyes, the shadow of the giant that came out of the darkness for a brief moment trembled in the wind. Countless pieces of armor fell off like scales and shattered in the wind, returning to the surging darkness once again. It was like a sand statue dissolving in the tide. It collapsed rapidly. This is, Alistair's eyes were filled with uncontrollable scarlet rage. This is a F** king fake. You are. Reason and fury were constantly alternating between each other, and his fragile nerves were repeatedly jumping on both sides. Countless vicious curses and unbearable curses flowed from his mouth, tormenting his innate self-restraint and demeanor. He had actually been fooled by Huaishir. Another time, and then another time. This unprecedented humiliation was like a slap to his face, constantly slapping his face. It was simply endless. It was as though he couldn't bear to part with such a soft and beautiful place and wanted to keep it for a year. The changes between reality and illusion were simply too confusing. Even after reading all of Huaishir's records, he was still unable to grasp the pulse of the situation. No, in the end, it did not lie with Huaishir. It was Osiris. After witnessing the birth of the Colossus, with Tian-Ke as a precedent, he had never doubted the truth of the matter. This was the illustrious reputation left behind by Orton, blinded by a single leaf. If Huaishir was able to simulate Tian-Ke because of his experience as Yun Zhongjuan and Ying Fangzhou's teachings, then he knew nothing about the complex structure of Osiris. Moreover, the pure, ferocious nature of Nautilus was simply unable to reproduce the complex system that countless geniuses had painstakingly created. What's more, even if all of Nautilus' disasters were exhausted, it could not reproduce 1/10 of the majesty of the war weapon. There were too many doubts. As long as he thought about it a little, he could understand it. As long as he questioned it a little, he could expose it, but he forgot to think. The shame from reason continued to play in his mind, looking for every doubt. But no matter how much he thought about it, no matter how much he speculated, why hadn't this cold feeling dissipated? Or, in a short period of time, Alistair's expression kept changing. When a terrifying guess emerged in his heart, he involuntarily raised his head and looked at the dancing darkness. Among the exhausted behemoth, the vague outline of Huaishur could be seen. "Goodbye." A warm smile appeared on the face that emerged from the darkness, and a finger was raised from the lips and sent into the distance. A flying kiss? Alistair's eyes widened in confusion, unable to understand. But soon he found that the invisible flying kiss was not for him, but flew behind him to the wilderness outside the city. Farther away in the mountains, farther away in the lake. 241 kilometers away from the straight line coordinates. The steel giant finally seized the last opportunity and rushed to the predetermined location. After propping up the dragon gun and cannon, half kneeling on the ground, "Anubis!" "Phew! I've hurried. I've finally arrived." Madame Chen exhaled the breath from the bottom of her heart, narrowed her eyes, and peeked at the passionate kiss from afar. She could not help but click her tongue. Young people nowadays, don't they know shame? At my age, I'm old enough to be your mother, but for some reason, a smug smile appeared on that cold face. "Not bad. Young man, you have good taste. It's a pity that I'm a woman you can't get." Indifferent to this passionate gratitude, Anubis coldly pulled the trigger. Boundless blood rose from Anubis' enormous body. Judgment prototype, annihilation echo, dragon summoning flute, activate. A prototype weapon that was enough to stand in the same rank as the huge war weapons equipped by the Ivory Tower and the main cannon of the Sky Prison Fortress roared. With the blood of the 16 large groups of hell collected along the way as the sacrifice and the souls and deaths of countless condensed people as the axis, the surging high pressure quickly shrank in the spear-shaped cannon, turning into a crystal-clear scarlet crystal. Accompanied by the pull of the trigger, the earth wailed, and a huge crack burst open under the ravaging of the reaction force, and the solemn light flew out from the barrel that was burning red. This was the ultimate kill that Huaishur had prepared for Alistair. When the thin scarlet light flew out, the shadow of the huge scale behind Anubis suddenly shook. On one side of the scale, the feathers silently burned into ashes, and the heart on the other side sank into the deepest hell. A solemn and hoarse announcement echoed in everyone's ears, and the judgment from the utopia descended into every soul. It whispered in the ears of those trembling under the judgment. "The day of judgment has arrived. Thy evil deeds are unforgivable. I hereby declare to all sides that this is the punishment of the sinner. This is the law of heaven's punishment. This is the authority that will not change in 10,000 lifetimes. This is thy destruction." There was no process, no waiting, no gap, no room to dodge or escape. The closed loop that came from cause and effect was completed the moment the trigger was pulled. At this moment, there was only one ending left. "Pa!" A soft and crisp sound spread out from Alistair's back. It seemed to be a gentle pat, but it caused the halo above his head to tremble violently and be dyed with a layer of darkness. Countless fine cracks appeared on the ruler's crown. The collapse had begun. Chapter 1142. It was like a cheap plastic bag that was crushed by a rich harvest. Endless death was stuffed into that body, causing Alistair's body to swell rapidly like a balloon. Then it burst his soul, body, and will instantly usher in the most complete disintegration and annihilation. Here, on behalf of the Republic, I issue a judgment to the Golden Dawn. Under this ultimate attack that Anubis had carefully prepared, his death was irreversible. Resistance, struggle, and even all the preset methods and means were all useless. Just like that, he quietly turned into dust. You don't even think about it. Alistair roared. Just as he was turning into ashes, the solidified person's eyes turned scarlet. He held on tightly to his own death and life, not allowing anyone to take it away from him. His death came to an abrupt end. Stagnation. The shattered card was mended once again. Under the shattered halo, the incomplete body, with only an outline, was suspended in midair. The flames in his only eye surged. The destruction was not expelled. Instead, it was forcibly transformed into a phenomenon and frozen in his body. It was like tearing out the page in the middle of a book that recorded death and forcibly connecting it to the end. Through such a strange method, it existed in the present. However, in the shattered card and the shattered body, a feeling that was completely different from the same realm, the same as hell, and even all the known waves of source substances slowly flowed out. The essence was revealed. Was that kind of soul sublimated or solidified? It was impossible to judge and difficult to understand. Even its composition was completely different from that of humans, but it was also different from everything in hell. It was not human because humans could not have such strange characteristics. It was also not like a spirit because the source substance of a spirit would not be so complicated and heterogeneous. Was it man-made or was it naturally formed? It was impossible to judge and impossible to understand. Or was this the so-called, the chosen one mentioned on the card? There were too many mysteries and too many strange things. First, there was the promotion of the ruler, followed by Yun Zhongjuan's light of purification, followed by Osiris' sudden appearance and the destruction of the illusion, and finally, Anubis' ultimate attack thousands of miles away, and even Alistair's miraculous resurrection. What happened in these few short moments was too much for the eyes to take in. Too much information flooded everyone's consciousness, making this short period of time feel as long as several days and nights of waiting. But no matter what happened, death would not change anything. Hatred wouldn't. He wouldn't give his opponent any breathing room. Nor would he give his opponent any time to transform like the villains in anime. The moment Alistair began to recover, the darkness once again contracted, and the hatred that was about to dissipate gathered once again under the recovery of the enemy. The Nautilus roared. Darkness swept over like a tide. Go away! Alistair raised his broken arm as if he was clenching something. A cold wave appeared out of nowhere, and the extreme frost hell appeared. It came from the deepest part of the abyss. It was said to have broken through the absolute zero temperature, and could even freeze one's soul. It was recorded and reproduced. Following the command of the hand, the low temperature flew forward. However, right in front of the cold wave, the surging darkness suddenly split apart and spread out in all directions. The endless darkness turned into countless iron crows. They screeched and split apart under the erosion of the cold wave. They brushed against the edge of the frost and gathered again, pouncing towards him. The outline of the ultimate emerged from the darkness. Great Siming. Under the evolution of the Nautilus, the door of darkness opened in an instant and shrouded Alistair's figure. Wishful thinking, the solidified figure's expression was ferocious. In the blink of an eye, he could make such a fierce change, which was admirable. But this was as far as he could go. As early as the moment Huai Shi imitated Tian Ke, he had already guessed such a possibility. For Alistair, the current change was just a repeat of the same old trick, which was not worth any shock or wavering at all. Endless transformations, inexhaustible killing, inexhaustible destruction. After a few short exchanges, Alistair had long been familiar with the strange nature of the Nautilus. In a contest with such an opponent, pure attack and defense were only delaying the time of defeat. If he could not destroy it in an instant with superior power, then he could only use other methods to imprison this beast that had escaped from the cage back into the iron cage. To use the tightest seal in the world, as long as it was shackled and controlled, it would not be long before this uncontrollable hatred tore Huaishur into pieces. In an instant, Alistair's finger suddenly stretched out and flicked upwards. As if it had stirred something of great weight, the place beneath his feet that stood aloof from the world rumbled as the earth churned. The great city that was built amidst layers of earth veins and calamities was distorted as well. It was like a huge book that was spread open on the ground. East and west, the two parts of the city rose quickly in a strange posture. The entire isolated place shook violently and turned into a huge book again. It closed inwards towards the Nautilus. Amidst the rumbling, it moved at a speed faster than lightning. The seal of the isolated place was completed, and just before that, the endless darkness of the abyss had already emerged from the closed book. With the manipulation from the Book of Law, the isolated place was transformed. A large number of incident records appeared again. In the blink of an eye, a brand new hell was created from it, a cage prepared for the Nautilus. Now, in the endless darkness, the reborn hell was rapidly shrinking inwards, squeezing every inch of space and tightening the noose bit by bit from the outside. The Nautilus was constantly changing. Sometimes crows flew, sometimes it was like a tide, and finally it turned into a thick black fog and spread. But no matter what, no gap could be found in this cage. Although it was an empty space, in essence, this was the Sweetwater Abyss that was recreated by Bennett's incident records. It evolved into the nothingness of the beginning. This was the eternal, empty, and desolate abyss before the birth of the present realm. In just a few seconds, the internal space had shrunk from tens of kilometers to only a few hundred meters. Everything was falling apart under the ravaging of this powerful force. The Nautilus could no longer maintain its solemn outline. Collapse! The darkness kept surging like an angry volcano. To be able to rely on external forces with such meager strength to hold on until now and almost kill me, you should be proud of this battle. Alistair muttered in a hoarse voice. He didn't even know if he was rejoicing or afraid. It seems that I've underestimated you. Why, sure. You're more of a threat than I expected. Are you very powerful? In the dancing darkness, Huaishur's face faintly appeared with a mocking smile. What's there to be proud of when I almost defeated you? Or do you think that the ruler is amazing? That kind of thing has been killed many times. Before he finished speaking, the surging darkness suddenly froze. It was as if something huge had emerged from it, but it couldn't break through the shackles of hell and couldn't condense again. But with Huaishur's words, endless hatred and loathing began to surge and collide with each other. A cluster of dazzling sparks appeared in the solidified soul as hard as iron. Light emerged. It was so sharp. It was so dazzling. Alistair's expression was slightly sluggish. His palms quickly closed, and hell shrank inward, wanting to completely crush everything and return to the most basic origin substance. But at that moment, he found that the collapsing hell had stopped. It was as if something was stuck in it. There was some kind of power that was beyond his expectations brewing inside him. It spread and pushed outwards, wrestling with the hell that was imprisoning him. He sneered mockingly at his enemy. Indeed, countless records can almost be regarded as countless methods. They are really changeable. To be able to use such a technique to this extent, you are indeed very powerful. However, I have a question. Huaishur's face rose from the darkness. looking at the hell and darkness above his head, as if he could see Alistair's face. He was full of curiosity. Why is it that among so many records, there isn't a single one that belongs to you? Alistair was silent and didn't speak. His face just became colder and colder. That's just a fake, Alistair. It's a product of your Alt+C. It's like copying someone else's hard work on a web page, changing the name, and posting it elsewhere. It looks very powerful and scary, but no matter what kind of results you achieve or what kind of honor you receive, it's not you. You always seem to be prepared. You always have the means to deal with all kinds of situations. But once an unexpected accident occurs, you will be at a loss. Why is it like this? Is it because you are young or because you are childish? I've been thinking about this, and I only understood later. Perhaps this is the real you, Alistair? Huaishur asked coldly. From the beginning to the end, you have only been plagiarizing. Boom. The darkness shook. In the sea of hatred that was constantly bursting with light, Huaishur's soul finally rose slowly, stepping on the path laid down by countless ancestors, the steps paved by countless hatred. He rose step by step, toward the peak of hell. But after the soul that was on the verge of shattering, endless darkness opened up, revealing a brilliance that was so dazzling that people couldn't look directly at it. It was like the sun. The sun rose from hell. At the same time when he noticed it, a chill ran down Alistair's spine again. But everything that happened in front of him made him confused, and confused like never before. What on earth was that? Yun Zhongjuan? Great Siming? Or Osiris? None of them. But the brilliance that was visible to the naked eye was the light that rose from the darkest place. That was East Lord. At the last moment, he heard a teasing voice in the darkness. It was full of gratitude. "Thank you, Alistair," Huaishur said. Thank you for creating such a unique environment for me. If it weren't for you, how could I find such a perfect opportunity? How could I smoothly complete the secret ritual of advancing to East Lord?" Accompanied by the triumphant laughter, the rolling darkness completely dissipated and was replaced by a complicated structure. The 4 heavens were above, and the 9 earths were below. Layers upon layers of matrices filled the space, and every tiny part of it was enough to be annotated with an infinite amount of information. That was the secret ritual that Tongyi personally engraved in Huaishur's soul and engraved in the Book of Destiny. Now, with Nautilus as the sacrifice and endless hatred and disaster as the source, everything was included in this secret ritual that could burn everything. Finally, it was thrown into Huaishur's soul. Could it succeed? No, it should be said that there was still a possibility of success. It didn't have a unique characteristic divinity to control the scorching sun, and a soul that could bear the majestic light. In such a hurry, in such a rush, in such a violation of the rules, to use such a method to advance? Could it be that after counting to 10,000 decimal places behind the success rate, there would be a number other than 0? It would definitely fail. It would definitely collapse in the middle. It would also be devoured by the miracle that it created. In the end, the sun that gathered endless miracles and disasters would also quickly usher in the end of its lifespan. Like a star collapsing, it would shrink inwardly, it would evolve into endless destruction. Just like now, amidst Huaishur's laughter, the fusion of East Lord began. Thousands of rays of light engulfed his soul and wrapped him in it as if he was wearing a layer of glorious and solemn clothes. The dazzling halo on his crown was like a crown. Just like that, burning, he slowly rose from the deepest part of hell, towards the sky beyond the vault of heaven, towards hell beyond hell. However, countless obstacles blocked in front of him, binding the budding sun, preventing it from exerting its infinite power and preventing the giant from being born. The turbulent miracles and disasters roared together with the burning Nautilus. Hell shook. Everything was annihilated in the spreading flames. The gigantic book that stood aloof from the world began to tremble violently. Wisps of pitch-black smoke rose from the pages of the book. On the cover, the emblem that represented the sun rapidly expanded and spread. It was as if the scorching sun was already in front of him. Imprisoned in this small bottle, Alistair's face was pale. The broken outline opened his mouth and shouted. He mobilized all his power to suppress the destruction that was about to erupt, but would it be of any use? East Lord was destined to be destroyed, and hell created by the Golden Dawn. Which one would be the first to face destruction? But now there was no turning back. It was just like a Why poem. The moment that lunatic used the Nautilus to advance, both sides had been pushed to the edge of the cliff together, using the destined failure in exchange for Alistair's failure, using his own destruction in exchange for the destruction of the isolated place. This was Weisher's suicide plan. As for the second step after Anubis, originally, he just wanted to find a gap in the battle, a gap of 10 seconds, enough time for him to complete the secret ritual and advance. But 10 seconds was too extravagant. It was extravagant enough for countless destruction and deaths to occur. Even when Alistair was reborn from Anubis' punishment, Weisher had already given up this plan. But like a joke of fate, Alistair actually took the initiative to imprison him in the seal. He was even afraid that he would have any opportunity to take advantage of, so he completely isolated the inside from the outside. Originally, it was just an explosion like gunpowder, but now it had advanced into a bomb. In this sealed and stable space, when Dong Jun failed in his advancement and met his demise, the terrifying power that was generated would break through the shackles and descend upon this isolated place with a destructive force that was 100 times stronger than before. Now, would he burn out first, or would the hell created by Alistair fall apart? Weisher laughed, opened his arms, and threw himself into the eternal flame. In an instant, he burned into nothingness. However, in the pain that was comparable to the annihilation of his soul, he had a strange hallucination, a feeling that he had turned into a star, hanging high in the eternal darkness, releasing endless light, illuminating, growing, and destroying everything. But he still couldn't completely integrate. The restrictions from the Gaia fragment and the rules of the bet bound his soul, isolating him from the miracle he had created. Like an asbestos fireproof suit, it allowed him to roam freely in the destructive light. Then he heard the wail of the world breaking. Hell trembled. In the spreading flame, tiny cracks appeared, lingering on the edge of destruction, but they were restrained and suppressed by the furious solidifiers. Only the mocking laughter echoed in Alistair's ears. It was so ear-piercing. How did it feel to hug a bomb? How did it feel to be trapped in a cocoon of your own making? Also, did the flames of this sun burn his hands? At the moment when the limit was reached, all he could hear was the sound of the halo above the ruler's head shattering. A huge crack appeared on the cover of the giant book that was isolated from the world. In the blink of an eye, it was destroyed from the inside out. Countless fragments and records flew into the distance under the eruption of the flame, and the blazing sun finally jumped out from within. Weisher laughed, opened his arms, and embraced the world in front of him. Gaia shook violently. After hundreds of years, it once again welcomed the light of the sun. The solemn light will quickly rose into the sky. Within it, Weisher extracted the miracles and disasters that constantly collided and destroyed each other, causing the endless flame to converge. In the short moment before the self-destruction, he pulled out his sword. Towards the front, like the sudden eruption of the solar wind, endless heat was thrown out by the angry star, forming a fleeting flare. And the sword that gathered all the power had already turned into a light that pierced the heavens and the earth, speeding past Alistair's side. It left the ruler, who was waiting for death, behind. Forward, up, towards the higher parts of the sky, those sickening rainbow-colored rays of light, connecting all the forces of hell, communicating with the source substance, and disasters, forming a net, heaven ladder. Just like that, Alistair, Mathers, and all the rulers and chess players of hell roared, Chapter 1143. What happened? Where am I? Who am I? And what is this bastard trying to do? At that moment, almost all the players in hell widened their eyes in shock. Their eyes were red, and they were burning with anger. Why, sure, you motherf asterisker. Not only Alistair, but even Mathers, who was outside the chessboard, could not help but roar in his heart. He would rather you cut down Alistair. Instead, what's the difference between moving the stairway to heaven at this juncture and destroying their lives? Since the start of the duel, why did Golden Dawn hold back for so long? Did they spend so much effort just to get rid of the remnants of the utopia? Wasn't it to complete the stairway to heaven and connect the entire Abyss faction into one? Now that the side mission had not been completed, the main mission was about to fail. Some bastard did not want to use his own Wi-Fi and wanted to cut off everyone's Wi-Fi. Well, if I can't do it, others can forget about it. This wave is the same as heaven and earth. But now, no matter how much anger and roars there were, they could not stop the sun that suddenly rose. But right at that moment, dark clouds suddenly appeared in the sky. A giant bone pillar that seemed to support the entire world appeared without warning in the sky and smashed down on the rising sun. Storm Totem. It was a war weapon from the Sea of Thunder, a terrifying weapon that was said to be able to destroy tens of thousands of troops under the wrath of the Dwarf King. At this moment, when the giant pillar appeared, the Dwarf King's projection flashed for a moment. He seemed to be holding the giant pillar tightly and smashing it down on the mortal world. Immediately after, the storm totem carried an endless amount of mass, as well as mournful frost and lightning as it descended towards the rising sun wheel. But the destruction that fell could not stop the destruction that rose. The huge force tore through the outer corona of the fake East King with irresistible force, smashing the surging light into pieces. But right after the sun wheel shattered, a burning white rainbow flew out. It was the soul of a sublimator. It absorbed the flames of the scorching sun, and the pain of hell transformed and tempered, forming a dazzling blade. The sunwheel sword, which was poured with all its heart and soul and entrusted with endless resentment and hatred, went straight forward, piercing through the realm of myriad transformations cast by the jesters. It tore through the layers of the maze, leaving only a faint sound like the trembling of zither strings. Distant and desolate, like the lingering sound of a whale's cry, it spread in the wind and lingered in the ears. It was the laughter of Nautilus, the cold and sinister laughter of countless solidified souls. Regardless of how many obstacles fell from the sky, regardless of the attacks that couldn't catch up to him, regardless of the mournful cries and roars. The burning East Monarch went up against the sudden increase in gravity, leaving behind a crimson trail. The stairway to heaven shook violently, trembling in fear as it shrank upwards. But it was too late. A flick of the finger was equivalent to 20 instantaneous moments. 20 thoughts were equivalent to 90 instantaneous moments. Impermanence of samsara. In this short period of time, the Sunwheel sword rose up from the frozen world and took the place of the souls that had died 70 years ago. It revealed the delayed revenge to the world 70 years later. Now, karma was right in front of him. Nothing could be stopped in the present realm, hell, the border, inside, and outside the chessboard, on the throne, in the decision-making room. Even every bystander who was paying attention to this gamble couldn't help but widen their eyes. He watched as destruction approached the rainbow light inch by inch. A roar of surprise or anger brewed in his throat, but it was too late to fly out. He could only stare at the rapidly dissipating flame. He looked at the dazzling trajectory it drew. He gritted his teeth. Could he make it in time? Could he make it in time? Could he touch it? Could he hold on? Questions, countless questions and conjectures emerged in his mind, but he didn't have time to think. All his consciousness was shocked by the burning light. They could only watch helplessly as it got closer and closer. In the intense burning, it went from dazzling to dim, from grand to subtle. In the end, the burning light could no longer catch up with the shrinking stairway to heaven and gradually dissipated. Countless people shouted in anger and countless sighs and gasps of relief. But those were no longer important at this moment. Only the last bit of metallic light flew out from the ashes. Under the push of Huaishur, it flew up an inch, like a rocket rising into the sky. He threw away all the burdens and unnecessary burdens, one by one. Dongjun, sun wheel, light flame, and finally, Huaishur. In the dissipation, the ascendant smiled and fell from the sky. Using the last of his strength, he waved goodbye to the iron light. Goodbye, Nautilus. Goodbye. He closed his eyes and sank into the darkness. At the last moment, he heard a crisp sound. The iron light condensed from 70 years of hatred, and the rainbow light that couldn't dodge in time touched in an instant. The sound was so melodious. There was no power or impact, no source substance or secret instrument. Only this hatred, and hatred from Nautilus was transmitted to the rebels in front of him in this fleeting touch without any discount. At that moment, the world was dead silent. Above the dark sky, the stairway to heaven that was like an aurora began to tremble violently. The brilliant colors were no longer there. Under the invading, inch by inch, it turned into a dazzling pitch black. A deafening collapse burst out. From every corner of the sky, the shattered rainbow light was like a meteorite constantly falling from the sky and hitting the ground, quickly melting and evaporating like ice. The whole world was shrouded in gorgeous rain, rain that was like tears. The stairway to heaven had fallen. The moment the connection was broken, the abyssal camp that was connected into one welcomed such a sudden separation. Before they could even react, a large amount of source substance that was circulating between each other leaked out of the stairway to heaven and quickly rose. The disasters that were bred in the cauldron died in the darkness before they could take shape. The transit station of the Eternal World Group, the fasting circle of the blessed land, the blood hall of the fallen kingdom, the heavenly abyss worship in the sea of thunder, those distant signals dissipated one by one. They went offline, fighting alone. The stalemate was broken at this moment, and the roar of war sounded from every place on the border. The first to react was the imprint of miracles, Fusang. The burning giant tree stood above the sky like a fortress. It was the first to break through the restraints of the fasting circle. It forcefully resisted the storm of the Sea of Thunder and broke into the depths of hell. Then, a large number of bronze giants carried the volcanic cannon on their backs, praising the name of Vulcan, and launched a fierce attack on the blood hall. The bowl of sweet dew in immortal stone incantations hand suddenly flipped. Endless sweet dew turned into poisonous water, gathering into a tide that swept across the land. Grasping this unprecedented advantage since the beginning of the war, all the chess players threw out the trump cards in their hands, no longer holding back, advancing into hell's territory. But then everything came to an abrupt end. The flying dust on the ground, the collapsing buildings, the spreading waves of air, the shattered dark clouds in the sky, hell's counterattack, reality's advancement, everything froze along with time on the chessboard. Pause. Dead silence. In the long silence, everyone looked up at the depths of the palace, at the towering throne between heaven and earth, and at the great Lord who lowered his eyes. That hand, which was adorned with several gorgeous rings, raised slightly. He pressed down. Everything froze in an instant. The dizzy diplomat slowly raised his head from the wheelchair, looking at the two dazzling lights in the thunderclouds, full of doubts. "Great Lord, are you not going to play?" He smiled slightly, not hiding his mockery. "Isn't cheating also part of the game, Marcus?" The great Lord did not care, and a distant voice came from the wind. "I have no objection to your many tricks. Otherwise, why didn't I interfere before the stairway to heaven collapsed?" He did not care about the opponent's mockery, and calmly replied, "Now, I'm just using my own authority. You don't have to be so calculative, right? But this authority is not within the rules," Marcus asked, haggling over every detail. "Even if the rules are not written, as a participant of the bet, I naturally have the right to pause in the middle of the game." The great Lord answered frankly, "Although the timing of the pause is not advantageous to you, there is no doubt that it is approved by the rules that we have jointly agreed on. Otherwise, why would the chessboard respond to my command?" Middle of the game? Marcus was taken aback for a moment, but he did not pester. Instead, he directly pointed to the core of the problem. "In your opinion, is it time to enter the next stage? Your actions are indeed praiseworthy. However, I don't intend to give up the victory just like that." The great Lord's finger slightly tapped on the armrest of the throne, setting off a faint thunder in the clouds. "Then, as you wish, Marcus, the second half has begun." Along with his words, the hand wearing many rings slowly raised, and a faint flash appeared between the 5 fingers. A key. "Get ready, Marcus. Take your world." The great Lord's smile was gloomy. "If you can take it." Just like that, it was thrown into the chessboard. Then, countless cracking sounds overlapped in one place. The seal hidden in the Gaia fragment, the shackles that had been entangled on it for a long time, and even the countless shackles that shrouded the chessboard, all fell off in an instant and disappeared without a trace. Just like that, the final shackles were released, and the power that had been stagnant for hundreds of years began to operate again. At this moment, the frozen world once again ushered in an earth-shattering change. Or rather, it returned to the original appearance of the fragment of the present realm. Even the dead Gaia and the fragment from the present realm still had the attributes and structure of the present realm. At this moment, countless streams of light darted out from the cracked ground. It was the hidden and solidified blood of Gaia. Now, the moment the shackles were released, it followed the convergence of the operation and evaporated, rose, came alive, and flew in all directions. The fragment shook violently, responding to the distant present realm. And so, the power from the present realm once again descended upon this empty world. On the fragment, the projection of 3 massive intersecting silhouettes appeared. Like giant pillars, they intersected with each other and once again propped up this dead world, enveloping all things within. Essence, transformation, origin, substance. The 3 pillars had appeared. In the observation department of the Command Bureau, the servers soaked in cooling liquid were already overloaded. Every second, enough data and information that ordinary people could not answer in their lifetime were being processed. Countless questions flashed by, and in the end, a rapidly expanding fan-shaped chart appeared on the screen. 30%, 40%, 50%, 60%, 65%. In the end, the number stopped at the limit of 66%, allowing the numbers behind the decimal point to continue to expand and increase, but it could no longer increase the number at the front by even a single point. At this moment, in the Gaia fragment, 66% of the territory was already under the control of the present realm, and this was after the Thunder Lord had interfered. Countless people were shouting in anger or suppressing the urge to vomit blood. If there was one more round, no, even if there was just half a day more, the present realm would be able to increase the territory under its control to 70%, or even 75%. At that time, the dust would be completely settled, and victory would be in their hands. And now, with the power of the present realm acting on it, the projection of the abyss began to appear in the fragment. Dark clouds spread across the sky, and endless lightning covered the sky. The giant drum was beaten again by the dwarf king, awakening endless disasters, torrential rain, gales, locusts, frost under the dark clouds. The rivers turned blood red, and countless bones floated in it, forming the palace of eternal death. The mountains collapsed, revealing the iron-colored ground beneath. Thick smoke spewed out, and countless zombie-like mechanical puppets were born from it. A pale, holy light that was as white as bones circulated between heaven and earth, outlining the beautiful mirage of paradise beneath the 9 lands. In the deep sea, aberrated creatures were born from magma or oceanic trenches. Dark eyes opened in strange places where humans rarely tread. The shattered stairway to heaven flashed in the sky for an instant, but in the end, it could not take shape again. Like a baby that had suddenly died in swaddling clothes, it wailed and dissipated silently. Only the reflection of a pale tower appeared out of thin air from the sea of blood and the mirage. It was between existence and nothingness, but it also seemed to be everywhere. Mather's expression was gloomy. He pursed his lips and said nothing. But the tears of blood in his heart could not be stopped. This is too much. Stairway to heaven, my stairway to heaven. Chapter 1144. Amidst the surging disasters, layers of death descended, embedded in the fragments like maggots in tarsal bones, and began to spread rapidly. Endless malice flowed through the veins, ocean currents and wind and pollution from the abyss constantly emerged everywhere in the fragments, like huge mold spots, disgusting. But at this moment, all the existences in the abyss camp saw such a scene, and there was no joy or pleasure in their hearts, not to mention that they were forced to this extent by the Discovery Realm, causing them to lose the initiative. Just the loss of the stairway to heaven alone made everyone's heart ache. There were even jesters who criticized the Grand Lord for not looking at the occasion. If you have the privilege, you should have used it earlier. Why did you have to wait until the stairway to heaven was broken before taking it out? Now that you're done showing off, you still have to suffer, right? Well, now that there was no stairway to heaven to connect the forces in the middle, the forces descending from the various hells could only fight on their own, unable to coordinate with each other to the greatest extent. The difference in deterrence was not just a little bit. If they were not careful, they would probably be separated and encircled by the Discovery Realm. But no one had the courage to raise an opinion in front of the Grand Lord. The last person who rushed in front of the Grand Lord and said that there was something wrong with his brain was they were already sitting opposite the Grand Lord and gambling with him. But no one dared to be like that lunatic Marcus and confront the ruler face to face. Even Marcus had to rely on the Utopia as a pillar to have room to maneuver freely in the abyss, didn't he? If a jester really dared to touch the pot that did not boil, the Pied Piper would not care. Maybe he would even watch from the side and laugh at his subordinates for not having good eyesight. His stupidity was enough to be included in this year's ranking of jesters' creative deaths. By the way, the first place had already been reserved by that guy, Hades. He had shot himself in the foot. He had the complete advantage, but in the end, Sephora Poetry had turned the tables and was killed by Nautilus. Whether it was a tragic ending or a funny one, no one else could match it. Ever since he could no longer provide the Pied Piper with happy plays and performances, he was stripped of the Abyss seal and removed from the jesters. According to reliable sources, that guy was also captured and made into a ring. a dignified jester and great alchemist, was reduced to the level of tutoring a child. How could the word tragic be enough to describe it? With such a tragic example, when the jesters saw Huaisher, it was as if they saw the old crooked tree in the astronomy club. They were terrified. Now, his ranking on the blacklist had risen to 46th place. Compared to the original 91, the progress was gratifying. If it wasn't for the fact that he hadn't reached the 5th stage yet, he might have been able to enter the top 20. He was simply a living thorn in the side of hell. Even though his reputation was polarized, he was already considered a righteous man by everyone in the evil demon sect. Now that they had the chance to teach such a personal lesson, they would definitely not be soft-hearted. Besides, weren't there still a group of lonely ghosts from Utopia at the front? For example, in front of the chessboard, Marcus. At that moment, the old diplomat in the wheelchair suddenly bent over and coughed violently. His wrinkled skin convulsed and contracted. His heart was in agony. His lungs were torn apart. His limbs were broken. His blood was dried up, and his soul was burning. Countless illusory pains descended on the soul that was like a candle in the wind. He raised his face. His pupils constricted in his bloodshot eyes, and a little darkness appeared. Signs of solidification. At this moment, the evaluation report in the Gaia fragment had been delivered to every member of the decision-making room. Earlier, the numbers had already lit up on the old man's wheelchair armrest. The correction was at 66%, and the distortion was at 34%. 34% of this world was already enveloped by the abyss, similarly as one of the stakes. 1/3 of Marcus' soul welcomed the favor and blessing of hell. Almost visible to the naked eye, the true essence of the abyss that was so pure that it was suffocating descended from the sky and poured into his soul. That power had already made countless jesters and crowns go crazy with jealousy. Hell seemed to be cheering for it. It tugged at his will. Tisk, in the Pantheon of Rome, the emperor who was watching this frowned. He didn't say anything and only held the hilt of his sword. He didn't say a word, but everyone could feel the chill and anger that lingered around the emperor. Next to Marcus, the creator, Nakajima, who didn't have a sense of presence from beginning to end, reached out and pulled out a syringe gun from his pocket, pressed it against Marcus' neck, and pulled the trigger. The potion from the Continuation Academy was injected into the soul. It forcibly restrained the spread of pollution and erosion at the risk of tearing his soul, and suppressed the symptoms of solidification to about 1/3. The old man in the wheelchair spasmed and suddenly stiffened from the twitching for a moment. After a long time, he coughed from his throat. Mottled white hair drooped from his forehead, and he looked extremely embarrassed. He was already sweating profusely. Just like that, Marcus lightly wiped the stains and saliva from the corner of his mouth. Then he raised his head again and indifferently urged, "What's wrong? Continue." So, in front of him, the chess players withdrew their concerned or worried gazes and didn't look back. Only the Grand Lord on the throne chuckled. "Look, my friend, such a stubborn struggle is really admirable." He sighed approvingly. "No matter how many times I see it, that dazzling, lightning-like light is so fascinating. Although being disrespectful to a powerhouse like you is a path to death, I really want to tell you to save it." Marcus shook his head slightly and sighed. "I already have an ideal to dedicate my life to. Nothing can be compared to it. Grand Lord, even you are the same." "Ha! You only have a short 100 years to wait. It's natural for you to be stubborn and biased. Marcus, I don't care about your contempt and rudeness. One day, you will understand how precious what I have given you is. Until then, you can struggle and resist, but it will be useless. Just like your world will eventually sink, you will eventually come here. The Grand Lord smiled magnanimously and told him, "Time is on our side. The strongest weapons in the world, the most precious treasures in the world, the creatures with the longest lifespan in hell, the remnants of the oldest epic, the most maddening beauties in the abyss, and even the pearls containing infinite power, the diamonds condensed from countless deaths, the disasters that save everything and at the same time completely distort everything in the Sea of Thunder, these things were all there. But unlike other places, the most beautiful things were only fit for the strongest to possess and enjoy. Just like the most dazzling soul in front of him at this moment, even in the Grand Lord's treasury, there weren't many collections that could compare to his. He had enough patience to wait. One day, Marcus would willingly stand in front of him. He had plenty of time. Time? Maybe. Marcus sighed indifferently. It's a pity that there's not much left for me. Nothing can be changed. Along with his sigh, the gloomy world on the chessboard blossomed, with light again. Countless miracles sprinkled from the projection of the 3 pillars. It spread throughout the realm. It illuminated the faces of every ascender. After the long prelude ended, this was the real beginning. They had finally truly taken control of the fragment of Gaia. They had taken control of everything. The goal of the Continuation Academy had been achieved. They had truly used the power of the emergence realm on this fragment, giving it life again, unblocking the earth veins, and rebuilding the universe. But the price was to face the reversal of the situation, as well as the counterattack and invasion of hell regardless of the consequences. In order to win this bet, all the rulers would do everything they could to smash this world into smithereens. It was extremely difficult to achieve something, but if they wanted to do something bad, a rat's droppings would be enough, just like what Huaishur had done in the past. Now, just thinking about the destruction hell would do by hook or by crook, everyone felt a mountain-like pressure. The short respite didn't last long, but the whole world was already dyed red by blood. The sound of the tide rose, accompanied by the low sound of bones grinding against each other. That strange sound enveloped the entire fragment along with the scarlet light. Everywhere it passed, the earth and the remains in the graves trembled slightly. The origin substances that had been dormant in the earth were attracted by the precipitation of hell, and they were drawn towards the enormous and dignified palace of darkness. Blood tax bone decree. In the cracks of the earth, at the top of the gloomy city formed by the collapse of the country, the throne set up for the withered king was empty. But even though the supreme king was not here, the imperial order he had issued was still in effect. In the palace, dozens of tax collectors and countless gloomy souls were prostrating on the ground. Only Gala alone had his head held high. As the representative of the 7 armies, he unfolded the scroll in his hand and conveyed the will of the King of Hell to the world in front of him. All death, all bones, all destruction, all would belong to the collapse of the country. Blood, bones, and souls, all of them belonged to the Supreme King. The moment the withered king's throne descended, an order that could not be changed was implanted into the shard. From that moment onwards, no, even before that, the many souls that had died in battle and the many souls that were floating on the battlefield were pulled by an endless force, involuntarily thrown into the true hell. All death would gather in the collapse of the country. All broken souls would become the fangs and claws of the collapse of the country. The river of blood surged and flowed under the dark ground, spreading. The winding road of bones extended from the ground. On both sides of the road, all the territories had become the land of the dead. Little green flames floated in the cold air, illuminating the corpses that crawled out of the soil. Here, the home of all things was built. Even if this final destination was not a peaceful one, on the other side of the world, The stooped shamans shouted hoarsely, singing praises and bowing to the eternal dark lightning in the sky. Under the gloomy sky, the dwarves blew huge horns embedded with gems and skulls. They echoed the lightning that kept striking down from the clouds. The ruler of the Sea of Thunder was drinking strong wine. She was named after the frost on the sea and the birth moon of the 16 suns. She was the dwarf king of the Sea of Thunder. She was dozens of meters tall and lofty. She held the storm totem in her hand and raised the whale horn cup to the world in front of her. Here, she made a toast. My lord's authority is supreme. Countless large groups of people chanted the name of the great lord, praising the mighty name of the strongest. They shouted and cheered fanatically. In the world-shaking sound of thunder, the storm totem beside the dwarf king suddenly rose by a section, then another section, and then another section, and then another section, and then another section. In the end, it turned into a huge pillar that seemed to support the entire world, causing the mighty sound of thunder to spread in all directions. Here, I bestow upon all of you the opportunity to reach the top, the achievement, and hope above all others. The dwarf king laughed loudly and spilled the wine in the cup. If you are not willing to be weak, if you are not willing to be enslaved, if you are not willing to be poor, you can fight against the strong, you can fight against your own race. This is the curse and blessing bestowed upon all of you. You must know that killing 10,000 people can make one person, but one person is far better than 10,000 mobs. 1 in 10,000. The authority of the great Lord had descended here. That was the law that came from the Sea of Lightning. It was a deep-rooted law and a supreme rule. The strong decided everything, the strong defeated everything, and the strong owned everything, stripped of all concealment and disguise, ridiculing the so-called morality and order. Only naked strength could achieve authority. Only then could one become a supreme king. The moment that authority descended, no matter if it was the earth or the underworld, the fighting spirit of all creatures suddenly burst forth. The killing intent in their hearts surged, and their eyes turned scarlet. They looked at each other, their own kind, and rubbed their palms. The desire to become stronger, the ambition to control everything, the unyielding pride that was unwilling to be under others. It didn't matter. None of it mattered. If one wanted to achieve something, then snatch, kill, and snatch everything. Kill your own kind, harm your own race, and all living things compete. After breaking through the natural limits and restrictions, even the weakest ant would be able to continuously grow stronger in this struggle, endlessly absorbing nutrients and strength from the authority of a grand monarch, becoming an expert that could rival all living beings. As long as one fought, one could improve. As long as one killed, one could grow. This was the supreme truth of the Sea of Thunder. For the earth, it was a cruel world like raising poisonous insects. As long as one was strong enough, one could do whatever one wanted. Even if one challenged the great Lord, as long as one could pass the trial, everyone would be able to witness this showdown between the strongest. If the position of the great Lord could be replaced, then this day that happened every 100 years would be the grandest and most fanatical festival in the Sea of Thunder. Now, this blessing from hell was sprinkling all over the mortal world. It seeped into every inch of soil and encouraged all living beings to decide who was the strongest. Soon, between the countless wills of the struggle, a huge cycle instantly rose from the ground. The hymn from the rancher spread from the holy paradise projection. The hunting angels held long swords in their hands, witnessing the faith and dedication of all living things. The food chain of hell was thus formed. All living things perish, all living things compete, and all living things eat each other. Then, the CEO of the Eternal World Group casually threw out the card in his hand. The scalp-numbing chain of summoning began, and frames were shrouded in the fragments. Independent registration personnel outsourcing, huge reward, eternal blessings, option bonus, meditation, spiritual cultivation, blissful labor. Under the impetus of eternal profits, the Smoky Mountains responded loudly, and flesh factories rose from the ground. Countless slaves wailed on the assembly line, unable to free themselves. The truth of all living things killing each other appeared here. As the degree of distortion increased crazily, the scroll from hell was quickly unfolding. Chapter 1145. At this moment, with the ringing of the bell that signaled the fall of the country, the existence in hell was awakened. Dark colors swept across the land like a tide. However, a dazzling wheel of light suddenly rose from the ground. A huge disk that looked like a huge sun appeared in the sky. At the top of the dark pyramid, countless hordes of hell screamed like chickens in an assembly line. Under the slash of the sacrificial knife, they offered their blood to the fallen gods. Thus, the huge disk decorated with countless gems in the sky was gradually dyed red by blood. The ancient calendar and the authority passed down by the gods descended. It was an ancient relic that established the order of the mortal world. In the ancient era of the sun, it turned time into 6 cycles. Divine calendar, I call upon you, King of the present. Liz looked up and used blood to smear the paint on her face. She spread her arms and shouted at the divine calendar in the sky, "Thou art the Lord of impermanence, the eternal slave, the one who fights against all. I am thy messenger. I am the flute of Taz Catrapoca. Now listen to my voice, respond to my words, and practice thy authority and principles." At the center of the huge divine calendar stone disk, as the noble blood priest shouted, the rock-carved face shook off the dust. As it spun rapidly, the stone face kept changing, tracing back to the past, causing the calendar carved on the stone plate to also reverse. It crossed the current era and extended to the past. From the 4-running calendar to the 4-water calendar, the 4-rain calendar, the 4-wind calendar. As the face that resembled the current era's feathered serpent disappeared from the stone disk, the face of a sinister and cold old man appeared and looked down. The tyrannical light of the setting sun shone on the mortal world. The king of myriad changes, Taz Catrapoca's divine power descended in front of his priest and gathered into an obsidian mirror shrouded in layers of smoke. In the ethereal mirror, a huge and strange demon eagle formed an outline and took away all the sacrifices. It condensed into a physical body and spread out its huge wings. Just like that, it carried the divine calendar that turned into a sun and rose into the sky. Divine mark, first era of the sun. From this moment onwards, the impermanence lord's hatred for the abyss was engraved into the fragment of Gaia. The dim light of the setting sun illuminated the gloomy world. Wherever it passed, invisible flames and meteors fell one after another. Ferocious beasts crawled out of the soil and evaporated all the erosion from the abyss. The blood river and thunderclouds were shattered by the cold sunlight, and a burning wall of fire rose from the border between the present realm and hell, burning all the large groups of people who dared to cross the border into ashes. The entire world was split into 2 by the power of the smoke mirror. Isolation hell. Right in front of the projection of paradise, a melodious melody suddenly rang out along with the sound of drums. Praises filled with endless joy and peace resounded throughout the world. To Shiva, to Vishnu, to Brahma, the withered, immortal stone incantation sat cross-legged. Countless images of the past and the faces of the gods appeared in the bowl of sweet dew in his hand, as well as the crystallization of endless good karma and evil karma. Countless people recited and preached in unison in the wind, describing the mystery of Brahma and I as one, the righteous principle of karma and reincarnation, and the only way to transcend all things. The good karma was accompanied by a brilliant golden light that enveloped the world. The skeletons left behind by countless immortals slowly appeared. Then, before anyone could react, loud laughter rang out. Boundless radiance surged in Immortal Stone Incantation's eyes. He propped up his withered body and leaped forward as if he had fallen into the endless abyss. As he fell, he burned intensely. Very quickly, it disappeared from sight. But the majestic and mighty praises did not cease, as if the whole world were commending him for the great benevolence he had uttered. He did not hesitate to burn his soul in this game of chess. After exhausting all of his remaining lifespan and good karma, the divine mark from the Veda Origin Codex was sprinkled into hell. The 6 paths of reincarnation reappeared. In the blink of an eye, countless ferocious asuras rose from the river of blood. Rakshasas appeared out of thin air in the frosty wind, and hungry ghosts crawled out of the wasteland as Immortal Stone Boat sacrificed himself. Endless power gathered in hell. Like a great tonic for the abyss, the darkness suddenly expanded. Not only the fallen nation, the Sea of Thunder, the Eternal Group, and even the Blessed Land and the Dark Eyes Black River benefited greatly from this generous gift. But at that moment, the chess players' expressions were not pleasantly surprised. Instead, they began to twitch visibly with unbearable rage. Some giants and jesters even began to curse. Disgusting. 2F*, King Disgusting. Even celestial genealogy was not so F*, King Disgusting. How did this old thing disgust so many people? The temporary increase in power and the appearance of hell was just a facade. It was honey wrapped around the cannonball. The true essence was the 6 paths of reincarnation that Stone Incantation had not hesitated to burn his own soul and fall into eternal oblivion. With his own sacrifice, he had imprinted the 6 paths of reincarnation into the fragment. That guy had turned all the savings of the Indian genealogy into the 3 paths of beast, evil spirit, and Asura, and thrown them into the abyss. Under the Stone Incantation's sowing, endless evil began to flourish in different hells. But the problem was, what the F*** did he want this for? It was like accidentally clicking on a web page, and 100,000 pop-ups popped up. In the blink of an eye, an entire family of garbage was loaded into the hard drive. Now, antivirus software, browsers, compressed packages, players, calendars, wallpapers, download assistants. Countless gifts from India were spread all over the territory of the abyss. Regardless of whether the abyss was willing or not, they were forcefully shoved in. Good stuff. All of it was good stuff. Shoving the 4 major castes into the Sea of Thunder, shoving the righteous and good Dharma into the Blessed Land, covering the 6 paths of reincarnation until the fallen nation. What 1 in 10,000, what hell's food chain, what 996, they did not care. They called on everyone to lie flat from now on. What the F** was this, not to mention those large groups using the land of the abyss to plant food from the reality realm, and even if they planted it, it would not be their own. Those Asuras and Rakshasas could not be killed in large groups, and it was extremely troublesome to use them. Moreover, they were born with the secret of ascetic practices and cultivation in their minds. As long as they made a wish to do ascetic practices and persevered for a few rounds, there would be no more after that. According to the rules of the 6 paths of reincarnation, once they accumulated enough good karma, they would directly reincarnate and transcend to the 3 paths of good in the reality realm, borrowing a chicken to lay eggs. This bunch of stinky beggars, they would not even let go of the rice bowl of hell. As long as they could do it, they would do it to death. Hawaii sure sent it once, blowing up the heaven ladder, and that was it. You, on the other hand, want to use the abyss to send a ready-made 6 paths of reincarnation back. If they were not willing to let that guy's miracle engraving gradually develop in the abyss, they could only use their own authoritative relics to forcibly suppress and isolate it. Before hell could unfold, a nail had already been smashed into the nest. It fell to the ground and took root. It was as if a mouthful of thick phlegm had suddenly been spat into a pot. They had no choice but to scoop it out, as it made them feel even more uncomfortable. Closely following immortal stone incantations, sacrifice, Fusang, which was hovering above the sky, suddenly descended. Huge roots plunged deep into the earth, piercing into the mountains and earth veins. The towering giant tree rose again, its crown covering thousands of miles like clouds, tearing apart the grayish-black clouds that were like iron curtains. Rays of sunlight shone through the clumps of branches and leaves, illuminating all things. In an instant, all things grew, and countless plants and trees emerged from the soil. A hurricane blew down from above the sky at the top of Fusang. The Blue Emperor looked in the direction where immortal stone incantation had dissipated. Her face was expressionless as she sighed, silently. For so many years, we couldn't stand each other. Although there were many disagreements, now we are in the same boat. Don't let his sacrifice be in vain. She waved her sleeves and ordered the young people behind her. It's time to do something. Behind her, the 4 heroes of Jixia bowed their heads. Their expressions were solemn. Azure Sun, Zhuming, Baizong, Xianying. After 1,000 years of inheritance, the 4 heroes of Jixia were the hosts and vessels of the 4 laws of heaven. At this moment, in the huge alchemy matrix with Fusang as the main axis, the faces of the 4 heroes suddenly cracked. A huge radiance rose from their collapsing bodies, flying in all directions under the illumination of Fusang. Under the illumination of this radiance, the silent mortal world fell into a temporary stagnation. Then a strange rhythm gradually emerged from the earth and wind. Between the branches and leaves of Fusang, the illumination gradually dimmed and was replaced by a clear and bright night. Bits of starlight fell through the gaps in the canopy. The light of the 7 stars gradually rose into the sky, circling in the night. The Big Dipper. At this moment, the Big Dipper operated silently, drawing 24 scales in the sky. The stars moved. On the earth, the bleakness disappeared without a trace under the blowing of the wind, and was replaced by a moist aura from afar. Beginning of spring. Then a light drizzle sprinkled down from the beautiful clouds, gently caressing the earth, awakening the silent vitality. Rain. Above the gentle rain, dark clouds quickly gathered. Suddenly, the heavenly drum beat, and a vast and loud sound reverberated. It swept away all the decay and darkness, shaking the heaven and earth. Shaking above, drying below. Thunder rumbled in the sky, and the thunder was strong. Hibernation. A heavy rain suddenly fell, and the heaven and earth were fresh. As all living things were born, vigorous vitality rushed to the face. The coldness and gloominess were swept away. Clarity. Next was the valley rain, followed by the scorching heat of summer that fell on the earth. Beginning of summer. Soon, with the passing of the hot season, when the summer heat dissipated, traces of golden light gradually spread and enveloped the earth. Beginning of autumn. Cold autumn passed by with a snap of a finger. When the first snow covered everything, all living things were collected. From the falling snow that stretched to the end of the world, a cycle of vitality disappeared, and another cycle of vitality sprouted from the 9 lands. And it was a cycle enveloping the heaven and earth. After a cycle of the Big Dipper, the spring wind rose again, never stopping. Wherever it passed, the storm was no longer, the high heat and torrents calmed down. All living things were regulated, the 4 seasons were orderly, and the heavenly fate was circulating with the law of East Summer. the heaven and earth were reformed. The Lotus Emperor laughed and threw away the dissipating Big Dipper in his hand. The 24 solar terms were completed, with the actions of East, Summer, India, and America, the turbulent mortal world ushered in the order of humans, and the power from the present realm entered it bit by bit. Seeing the success of the 24 solar terms of East Summer, Russell laughed even more happily than the mystic bird. The mystic bird turned around and looked at the old face that stretched out like a peony flower, and was inexplicably shocked. "What are you laughing at?" "I thought of something that makes me happy." Russell held his chin and blinked at his old friend. "Now, the Continuation Academy and the others should be considering my previous proposal, right?" Along with his words, a dazzling radiance descended on the chessboard again. The dazzling golden card hovered at the top of the chessboard. In the sky, great Seeming's divinity revolved and gathered into a solemn and cold figure. The King of Danbois. Under his feet, the projection of the city in the other realm slowly emerged, and the miracle that he had created with his own hands gradually merged into the wilderness, between the layers of buildings that rose from the ground. Huaishur slowly raised his head and took a deep breath. It was as if he was still recalling the unprecedented pleasure of self-destruction just now. He whistled proudly. "Phew, although it's a little late to appear, it should still be in time." He lowered his head and looked at his 5 fingers that were spread out, and in his palm, the chess piece that had appeared out of nowhere revealed a happy smile. "Friends, let us raise the stars again." At that moment, in his palm, the Black Queen's chess piece flowed with the light of stars. The unparalleled achievements established by the Astronomy Club in the past were revealed here. Foundation of ectoplasm, or, to call it by another name, cut off all the secret methods of secret methods and create all the technology of technology. The turning point of the generation of gods. The glorious prologue of the golden age of the present realm. So said the first project, Zarathustra. Chapter 1146. Now, what appeared in the form of the Black Queen was a reconstructed artifact from the pillar of the divine marrow, an existence known as the foundation of astral matter, the carrier of the great mystic apparatus, as Zarathustra said. However, its existence and status were the highest secrets of the Astronomical Association, and it was on the same level as the precursor. At this moment, its copy was in his hands. Even though the touch in his palm was light and fleeting like a phantom, Huaishur felt as if his soul was about to be crushed by an invisible weight. The weight of thousands of pounds. This was the crystallization of history. The Continuation Academy intercepted countless fragments of the glorious past to form a record of events. It replicated the great mystic apparatus that now shrouded the present realm, and then modified and deleted it according to the environment of the Gaia fragment. In the end, this power was grasped in Huaishur's hands. Even if it was only a temporary simulation and reconstruction on the chessboard, it still made him almost unable to breathe. Unexpectedly, Huaishur was not confused, nor was he surprised. It was as if he had been prepared. Even he was a little surprised. When this thing appeared in his hand without warning, his mind naturally appeared how to use it, application methods, and even precautions, as well as a simplified version of the operation guide of more than tens of thousands of words. It was as if it was just a flash of inspiration. It was just a thought in his mind, and all the fragments of memory automatically overlapped together, generating unimaginable information. The patterns on the wall, the patterns on the plates, the smile of the receptionist, the fragrance floating in the air, and the memories of the past, the sudden flash of ideas. When each element collided with each other, a large piece of information would appear. The memory that emerged out of thin air grew rapidly, and it was reorganized in Huaishur's unintentional association. The compressed file was uncompressed, After the whole process was over, Huaisha realized what had happened, and he felt a chill down his spine. A glimpse of the whole leopard reveals the whole leopard. Apart from that, he didn't know how many other things the lunatics in the Continuation Academy had stuffed into his memories that he didn't notice. Even before that, he didn't have any awareness and was unwittingly injected with so many things that he didn't even think about. He was like an unimportant chess piece on a chessboard, wasting time in a corner. But when the situation suddenly changed, he realized that he had been given an important mission that he had never imagined before. Now, not only was the foundation of ectoplasm given to him, but he was also equipped with Nakajima-kun, who was the closest person to the chessboard. Nakajima-kun could answer any of his questions and give him suggestions at any time. But why was it him? Or Russell was on the ceiling again. He could almost imagine Russell sitting on the sofa in the decision-making room with a teacup and a smile on his face. The Continuation Academy was indeed mysterious and unpredictable. However, their pursuit of absolute efficiency and absolute results, as well as their unique style of doing things, had already allowed Russell to feel their pulse. Is the Utopia a perfectionist? No, Utopia is just a bunch of paranoid people. This group of lunatics are the real perfectionists. Their work, enormous pressure, and unimaginably high danger were already destined. All of their plans had to be effective, and they had to use the safest way, the most economical way, the most efficient way, and the most perfect response to solve the problem. Otherwise, they couldn't resist the risks at all. If Russell wanted to do something, it wouldn't work. With the Continuation Academy's closed nature, even the former president's hand couldn't reach in, let alone him. He didn't need to do anything. He just needed to cooperate. As long as he sent Huaisha to them, they would naturally understand how valuable Huaisha was. Talent, resume, character, and even skills, as well as his terrifying sensitivity and courage for timing and opportunities, and his 1-in-a-million luck and perseverance. He was such a perfect tool. Who could resist not using him? Who wouldn't consider letting him play a little more role when the situation was tense? As long as this suggestion was made at the most appropriate time, the Continuation Academy wouldn't refuse. The foundation of ectoplasm, and other than Huaisha, who Russell had granted the authority of the Book of Destiny, who else could become the well-deserved protagonist at this time? Liz, Emperor Qing, Vulcan, Stone Incantation, or other ascendants? All the options added together were not as convenient as Huaisha. Besides, most importantly, Huaisha saved money. King of Danbois, as the rarest type of leader creature card. Although it didn't have a powerful skill that could determine the strategy of the battle like the powerful leader cards of other factions, it had a rare wave of powerful economic boost. Not only did it have the special effect of -1 depth and indiscriminate deterrence to all hell creatures within thousands of miles, but it also had an incomparably dazzling skill. Sacrifice, at the moment of entry. All the cards of the same faction in the graveyard area would return to Huaisha's hand. If more than 10 cards returned to Huaisha's hand, he could get a second skill. Future, all spells and frames of the same faction could be reduced to 0. Even if the miracles and power needed to conjure Zarathustra were immeasurable. But according to the Continuation Academy's estimation, as long as Huaisha was there, the cost could be reduced by at least 12%. Just this one person could save at least 1/9 of everyone's labor. At this moment, the moment Huaisha raised his hand, the rules of the bet began to judge. On the chessboard, countless cards leaped out of the darkness like a long dragon, turning into a tide and illuminating every dull face. From the moment the bet began, every card that was sacrificed in the realm returned from the graveyard and shone with glorious light once more. Large groups and legions that died in battle, ascendants that sacrificed themselves, and even the broken relics of the border, even the soulless stonecutter immortal was pulled out from the darkest hell, preserving the final record. The foundation of the abyss shook violently as the massive number of deaths were reversed, returning to a state before nothing happened. If it were outside of this place, Huaishur could not imagine that he would be able to do this one day. The Doomsday faction, which only had 8 or 9 cards, could not even be rated as C grade. It was just a supplementary card set of celestial genealogy. But now, there were only 2 factions on the chessboard, the Realm and the Abyss. Now that he had been recruited by the Astronomy Club, he could only represent the reality itself. All his teammates were in the same faction. All the cards that were placed in the graveyard returned to the hands of the players once again. And the light as glorious as the sun rose from Huaishur's head. The light of the future shone here. Countless amounts of origin substance descended from the sky like a flood, pouring into his body. In his hand, the Black Queen's chess piece slowly rose. Countless fine arrays emerged from it, overlapping with countless scenes. They slowly awakened and unfolded again. At that moment, he felt the Book of Destiny in his soul suddenly tremble. On the title page, a brand new emblem and status bar appeared. Then, endless records of scenes poured in. A torrent like the 7 seas breaching the dike swept through his soul, but it did not bring any pressure. He was already in the safe haven. Only the illusory voice echoed in his ears. Book of Destiny connected. Verification passed. Welcome back, Mr. President. The first project, Zarathustra, said, warm-up complete, awaiting your order. The magnificent blueprint slowly unfolded in his soul. Endless mysteries and laws flowed in the scenes. Huaishur felt that he was dissolving, but in a trance, he seemed to have become the whole world, feeling the low rumble of the world's operation. Now, the world was in his hands, waiting for his order. Huaishur opened his eyes and whispered to it, activate. At that moment, the endless blueprints in his soul broke through the restraints and rose into the sky, shaking the world. The magnificent light played a glorious chapter in history. The dark clouds were swept away. The clear night sky was like a crystal reflecting the light on the ground. The dead fragments trembled violently. Countless dust particles flew into the air, as if they were responding to a song from a long time ago. The 3 pillars projection operated at this moment, enveloping Huaishur's figure. At this moment, countless rays of intense light descended from the sky. All the cards that had returned to their hands were thrown out by the chess players again, offering sacrifices to the slowly unfolding great secret ritual. With these countless records from the present realm as pillars, they once again propped up the dome of the sky and rebuilt the stable land. The great secret ritual, Zarathustra, laid the foundation here. The gods died. Everything would be redefined in the hands of humans. The world of humans had descended. At this moment, on the distant land, old Lady Chachel, who was silently smoking her pipe, looked up. She stared at the glorious era that once belonged to them, the light that she had once taken for granted, as if it would last forever, the light that belonged to the utopia. What a pity! The beautiful past is gone. She sighed softly. That kid's luck is really not good. Even if he can become the president in the future, even if the utopia can be rebuilt one day, this glory might not be able to return. In this life, I'm afraid he can only relive the beauty of the past on the chessboard. But it was clearly a regretful sentence. But when she said that, the corners of her mouth could not help but curl up slightly. It was as if she was smiling. It was mocking and malicious. It was filled with regret and anticipation as she looked at the location of hell. Indeed, The past was full of happiness and beauty. But wasn't this happiness only meaningful if it was built on the pain of the opponent? Friends, let us relive everything in the past again. Let us taste the bitterness and bitterness of the past again, and look up at the world that you can't reach. That the world that we created, at that moment, endless brilliance rose from Huaishir's embrace. It was the stars, countless stars. The shining stars shone brightly and reappeared from the void bit by bit. They rose toward the sky, making the night no longer dark and gloomy, making the lonely sun no longer lonely. This was the legacy left behind by countless sages, the great cause of the Astronomical Association. Even if the night sky would eventually dim after the fall of the gods, we would still recreate the stars. Now, we had defined the existence of the stars. We had laid down the foundation of the utopia. We had laid down a hard-won achievement and saved this world again from the hands of hell. Countless stars left behind by the Creator flew toward the lonely and empty night sky under the support of the great secret apparatus, illuminating everything in the darkness. Every star was a framework created by the Creator's lifetime of hard work. Every ray of light was the essence that flowed out of human wisdom and knowledge. Mechanics, electromagnetism, thermodynamics, relativity, quantum, elements, hybrids, inorganic, organic, structure, interface, ocean currents, geology, oceans, minerals, evolution, genetics, cells, life, species. Now, the stars that were engraved in history gathered into an ocean and shone in the night sky again. It shone on all things. It re-established all the rules. A soft sigh filled with hope and blessings sounded in Huaishir's ears. It was the laughter of the souls that had long passed away in the distance. So, we embarked on the path to the stars, hoping to look back at the glory of this world. Chapter 1147. When the stars rose in the distance, the place was dark and gloomy. In the deepest part of the continuation academy, only a lone lamp slowly moved forward on the narrow road. Jaeger panted as he followed behind, sweating profusely. "How far is it?" "Soon." The dean walked in front with light steps and a flat voice. "2 hours ago, you said so. Before I came in, you seemed to have said the same thing to me. If I told you the truth, you might find it troublesome and not come." Dean 000 answered, without turning his head. "According to my understanding of you, I need to add some sunk costs for you to increase your initiative." Panting, Jaeger was stunned. "Then I really have to thank you. But don't worry, it's really soon now." The dean added, "It's just ahead." "I hope so." Jaeger shook his head and wiped the sweat on his forehead. He wished he could kick off his leather shoes. Walking barefoot was more comfortable than this thing. If he knew it would be so troublesome, he would have changed into looser clothes. But if he knew it would be so troublesome, he wouldn't have come even if he was beaten to death. "I say, don't you have any transportation here? Even if you can't drive on the cliff, a helicopter should be fine, right? In the sealed area, some laws may sometimes be abnormal. If you don't want to take a helicopter and drive into an invisible meat grinder," the dean asked considerately. "As far as I know, you don't have a backup, right? In fact, normal people don't have that thing." "Is that so? What a pity, hee." The mysterious figure in the protective suit tried his best to show a sense of humor that bordered on nonchalance. Jaeger was frightened. He was afraid that this guy would suddenly stop and say that walking is too boring. "Let me tell you a joke." Whether he could laugh or not was another matter. But his tortured nerves couldn't stand such a ridiculous scene. In this way, in the hurricane, they walked on the narrow cliff road, ignoring the deep darkness under their feet and the faint, strange echoes in the darkness, until finally the figure in front stopped. "We're here," the dean suddenly said. "Where?" Jaeger looked around blankly and saw the dean, who had climbed up the rock, reaching out to him and pulling him up. Finally, he caught a glimpse of the light rising from the precipice. In this narrow space under the rock stratum, in the deepest darkness, a wild wind blew from the bottom of the cliff. In the deep crevice of the earth, streaks of dim light appeared. They meandered like rivers and extended to the end of one's line of sight. Jaeger couldn't help but be dumbfounded by the strange colors that resembled polar neon. It was as if the deepest wound of the whole world was exposed before his eyes. It was tragic and spectacular. It was different from all the records and photos he had seen before. This was the kind of shock and trembling that could be felt with the naked eye, and even fear. This was the crack of the reality. Under the stitches of the Continuation Academy, there were scars left by the world itself. Wow, Jaeger sighed subconsciously. It's really that very big, no matter how much higher education one had and how profound one's attainments in rhetoric were, when faced with such a vast scene. One's eloquence would be shocked by reality, right? Other than big, he really had no other adjectives. Yes, it's really big. The dean nodded calmly. We are still far away from this branch. If we want to get closer, we have to walk for a long time, but it's already an eroded area. Without protective gear, it's no longer a place where humans can survive. Hundreds of years ago, the Astronomy Society completely killed Gaia there. 70 years ago, the fallen kingdom of heaven also fell into the core of the reality from there. Boom. With his words, the earth in the distance roared as if a mountain had collapsed. A hurricane blew. What's going on? Jaeger looked over blankly. It's probably growing? The dean replied. Compared to 4 years ago, the scene here is different. The last time we did a field survey, this was still an inconspicuous branch. Now, it's almost the size of the main crack. There are more than 6 cracks like this here. Every year, the Continuation Academy spends more than 20% of its resources to curb its expansion, but the results are minimal. The dean said, "You should have read our report, but reports are just words after all. This is why I brought you here." After a short silence, Jaeger sighed softly. "No one will deny the role of the Continuation Academy, Mr. Dean. As for the world creation plan, we have also pushed it to the end. Will it be of any help to us then? Maybe, but it can't cure the root cause. Remodeling can't solve all problems, Mr. Jaeger. Miracles have weight, and the reality is getting heavier and heavier. These cracks are the evidence that it can't bear. The fall of Kingdom of Heaven back then can at best be called a trigger. No matter how many times it is born and destroyed, if it can't make up for the strength of the house's skeleton, it can only passively delay its birth." The dean replied calmly, "Now, the consequences of the imbalance between the 3 pillars have begun to be reflected in the outer layer of the reality. The internal pressure is probably even more shocking if there is no Gaia fragment to repair it. Even with the world creation plan, it can't eradicate such a hidden danger. In the end, it's still the body of Kingdom of Heaven, right?" Jaeger sighed with a headache. Killing Gaia back then left a scar on this land that could never be healed. Later on, the fall of Kingdom of Heaven was like a sharp blade that could not be pulled out from the wound. Until now, the situation was actually just a loss of blood, which was enough to make many people wake up from their dreams with a smile. Not to mention the Continuation Academy, just the Command Bureau alone was about to be overwhelmed. The integrity of the 3 pillars, the maintenance of the great secret instrument, the safety of the reality, the increase in the degree of distortion, the launch of the War of the Worlds, the responsibilities and division of labor of each major lineage. There were countless tasks, each of which was important enough, and messing up any of them would be fatal. The people below may be cursing under the pressure of constant overtime and increasingly heavy work, but the people above were also trembling in fear and treading on thin ice. Whenever it involved the reality, every order and every decision was made. There were countless considerations and calculations behind it. We need time, more time. Jaeger rubbed the bridge of his nose and sighed softly. And we need victory, Mr. Dean. Even if it's unscrupulous victory, there will be victory. The dean replied calmly, turned his head from the abyss, and looked at the void behind him. If everything goes well, in the direction of the gaze, far away from the border, in the dark hell, inside the fragment, the stars in the sky unfolded. The night sky was illuminated by a brilliant light. The moment they witnessed this scene, all the hells rumbled, spewing out a massive amount of poison and pollution. Tens of thousands of bloody lights soared from the darkness and stretched out toward the unfolding stars. Up to this point, who didn't understand what the reality was planning? Now, the entire Gaia fragment was like a server that had left the reality. These guys wanted to root the entire system back again in the fragment. Once Zarathustra was fully unfolded, everything would be bound by the rules of the reality. When Huaishur held the administrator account in his hand, all the viruses, worms, and bugs that didn't belong to the system would be blocked bit by bit, suffocated, and finally completely expelled under all kinds of suppression. No matter who it was, they couldn't let the reality wrap this meticulously created noose around their necks at this moment, under the giant pillar of the storm totem. The dark Confucian king, Frost Moon descendant, threw down the wine cup in his hand expressionlessly, reached out, and took an ancient horn from the priest's hand. He aimed it at the sky and blew it loudly. The high-pitched and ear-piercing sound of the horn set off a storm, and countless ripples spread out. The sound rose into the night sky as if there was a substance, constantly fluctuating in the darkness, shaking the stars, and summoning the strange monsters from hell. Under the summoning of the bugle horn, the massive door of darkness opened abruptly in the night sky, and a strange star fell from it. It was like a pile of scarlet flesh and blood, and it constantly sprinkled blood rain all over the sky. Countless tentacles stretched out from above, stirring up the night sky, setting off a storm, and wantonly circling in the sea of stars, causing the stars to sway. In the Pantheon of Rome, a brilliant silhouette flashed for a moment. Suddenly, a bright moon flew out from the longbow, rose into the sky, and collided with the strange blood star. The miraculous engraving from Artemis went straight forward. The bright moon exuded the murderous intent of the goddess of the hunt. The shattered moonlight flew out like sharp rays, and the two sides collided, causing half the night sky to tremble. Not only that, in the deep palace of the fallen kingdom, an ancient sarcophagus slowly opened. The beautiful ruler sleeping in it opened her eyes, and immediately noticed the strange unfolding of this world. She could not help but widen her eyes in anger. How did it become like this? Gala, you bastard, what were you doing before? Beside her, Gala, who was also one of the 7 generals, coldly picked his toes, glanced at her, and replied, "Fighting." The beautiful woman was silent for a long time. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and suppressed the anger that was about to explode. "Calm down, Lamia, you must calm down. Don't lower yourself to the level of this lunatic who only has muscles in his brain. Why does the Supreme King love such a stupid guy?" In the midst of indescribable anger and jealousy, the ruler known as the Snake of the Blood River could no longer be bothered to rebuke this fellow. The huge snake body suddenly dissolved into endless rising blood and rose into the sky along with the river of blood. Countless huge halos spread out from the night sky. Those were strands of mycelium that glowed with strange light. Those scarlet mycelium sprouted from the blood and instantly spread across most of the night sky, growing into speckle-like fruits. On the fruits, The giant eyes slowly opened and looked down. The fruits of the blood river had been rooted in this night sky. But before they could grow rapidly, above the earth, in the giant Fusang tree that seemed to cover the world, a little dazzling starlight quickly rose and gathered in one place, turning into a mighty and endless river. It meandered through the night sky and directly cut the blood river in half. Just in front of the spreading stars, the surging river of flames became the vanguard and the city defense, wiping out all the cursed crystals and fruits. On the top of Fusang, the Qing emperor sneered disdainfully. In her hand, the exquisite and slender jade hairpin reflected the brilliance of the stars, and the miraculous engraving was operating in it, isolating the erosion of the endless blood. Distant Altair's star, beautiful woman of the river, the old lady sighed, leisurely, "Your river is still a little lacking." In the broken blood river, the giant snake was furious, and its ferocious figure appeared, colliding with the heavenly river that grew above Fusang. The shining starlight and blood drops sprinkled to the earth like rain. In the distance, in the mountains that were forever shrouded in thick smoke and pollution, a roar suddenly came. Strange flying machines spewed smoke and flames, and with the huge logo of the Eternal World Group, they quickly rose into the night sky. As the Eternal World Group, which had been silent for a long time, exerted its power, the projection from the blessed land slowly appeared in the sky. Hymns echoed, forming a door to the blessed land. The huge door was like a face that couldn't be seen clearly. Now, the huge mouth slowly opened. It greedily swallowed the stars. Chapter 1148. Amidst the praises of the hymn, the strange gate of paradise opened with a loud bang. On the blurry face, a pair of empty eyes opened, as if they were flowing with infinite holiness and majesty, overlooking everything in the world. Regardless of whether it was the stars or the earth, the present or hell, the ascendants or the consolidators, or the legions, that pair of eyes was filled with compassion and compassion that were absolutely indistinguishable. The love of the abyss flowed out from the abundant and pure divinity, mercifully embracing all things and giving them the ultimate liberation and redemption. Through devouring and digesting, all things dissolved in the stomach of hell and gathered together happily. Now it opened its big mouth and devoured the stars crazily. Under the attraction of divinity, the countless main frames of creation that had turned into stars swayed and were involuntarily pulled into the eternal darkness. Behind the gate of paradise, the purest light emerged, singing praises. "I say, isn't the frequency of your village eating too much?" Under the stars, Huaishir's expression gradually turned gloomy. He didn't even care about dealing with the aircraft launched by the Eternal World Group. Previously, the harassment of the Sea of Thunder and the attack of the fallen country were opponents that could be dealt with by focusing on dealing with them. But now, when the rancher's divine power appeared, the entire Zarathustra's great mystic ritual began to weaken. It was as if its foundation was being gnawed away. But in fact, it was no different from gnawing away at the foundation. After all, the rancher represented the god of hell that was born after the fall of the gods. In a sense, he was born with the ability to rule all things and interfere with the present realm. He represented the masters of the present realm of the gods. And the great mystic ritual Zarathustra was a denial of the past. As the proof of the succession of gods and humans, it was a precious crystallization created by the human world. Its existence proved that this world didn't belong to the gods, but to the humans themselves. Now, it was no longer possible to rely on the Gaia fragment to suppress the hell creatures. The contest between the two sides had changed from a fight between opponents to a wrestle between divine will and human will. The current Zarathustra in the expansion stage had no ability to resist the erosion of the rancher's main divinity. If left alone, the entire great mystic ritual would be eroded and covered by the projection of paradise, transforming it into the rancher's tool and claws. Thus, the stars revolved and gradually shrank inward. Under the suppression of the blessed lands, the great secret ritual's framework began to transform into a more stable and sealed structure. "Don't worry, Mr. Weisher." A blurry projection appeared in front of Weisher. The archbishop in a robe said, solemnly, "Leave it to us." Weisher froze for a moment, then nodded gratefully. "Then I'll leave it to you. It's my duty." The archbishop's projection disappeared. At that moment, inside the reality domain, inside the massive and solemn palace, hymns of praise rang out. Countless sacred lights that seemed to be the same as the blessed paradise rose into the night sky, surging mightily and decorating the night sky as if it was daytime. The song of glory resounded. Countless rays of light gathered and fired at the gate of paradise. It was obviously a hymn that praised the gods, but it contained a bone-deep killing intent. It looked no different from the ranchers, but the surging light made paradise tremble in anger. "It's starting! It's starting!" Inside and outside the chessboard, countless people widened their eyes. They had expected it. They finally started fighting. No one was surprised at all. If Weisher had the slightest intention of putting selfishness above public duty in the battle plan of Golden Dawn, then the Russian Federation genealogy's visit this time was purely to avenge a personal grudge through public affairs. Don't talk to me about the fall of the country and the Sea of Thunder. Don't talk to me about the Eternal World Group and the Eye of Darkness. Don't talk to me about the Pied Piper and the Jester. There was only one word in the eyes of these lunatics: ranchers. Don't ask if you ask. It's an expedition to hell. If you ask, do it. They would rather give up all the rewards after the victory. These ascetics who received the blessings of the Holy Spirit wanted to participate. As long as they were ranchers, even if they had no money, they would bring firewood and kerosene and run hundreds of thousands of miles to tie their opponents to the stake. Now, the abundant brilliance shrouded the night sky and covered the stars, but it did not interfere with the expansion of the great arcana. It was as if it did not exist, allowing the gate of paradise to release the Tao-Tai between the stars. In the beginning, Weisher was still shocked and confused. But soon, he found that no matter how the mouth of the abyss ate, the main framework of creation in the great arcana did not decrease at all before each star was devoured. It was replaced by a resplendent glow. It was as if it was cutting off its own flesh and blood to feed hell. The ranchers were allowed to swallow all the miraculous engravings that had been passed down for thousands of years, but it was as if it could never be finished. In the palace, the archbishop under the holy emblem raised his eyes and looked at the appearance of the Tao-Tai of paradise. A smile seemed to appear on the 10,000-year-old cold and gloomy face. "Eat, eat, this is thy body and blood, which is given up and shed for the sake of all people's absolution." Just like that, he recited the words of the Holy Scripture, but the main words were completely different from the words. How to define the appearance of God, how to conduct the sacrificial rites of believers, how to differentiate the three of the Trinity, how to differentiate between them. The originally unified divinity had now become a pot of porridge under the guidance of countless divergences. Countless thoughts and factions collided and attacked each other in the projection. Even the people of paradise began to show hatred among themselves, looking coldly at the heretics beside them. And what made the officiants of paradise most terrified was that a crack had appeared on the solemn statue in the temple. Within the crack, strange teeth and viscous liquid could be faintly seen surging. The divinity that the rancher had sent down had already split under the erosion of countless heretical theories. If it was not maintained properly, once the statue collapsed, the entire projection of paradise would be completely devoured by the divinity that had completely split. It was not that such a situation had not occurred before. As long as a large-scale sacrificial ceremony was held, the divinity would become clear again. But the problem was, would those bastards from the Russian Federation give them time to fix it? The moment the gate of paradise collapsed, dozens of burning figures soared into the sky, pouncing straight towards the projection of paradise. Holy spirits! Those were the burning souls of the saints of the Russian Federation, the weapons of war that were sublimated from the wills and creeds of countless knights. The war to reclaim the Holy Land and the divine essence sounded the horn once again. Now, the battle between the two sides had just begun. Huaishur could no longer be bothered to pay attention to that side. Without the interference of the rancher, with the assistance of other systems, the expansion of the great mystic instrument began to accelerate wildly. Wherever it passed, all the wills of hell were completely suppressed. Wherever the stars shone, everything was shrouded under the law of the present realm. Gradually, it went deep into the core of the fragment, and in the distant present realm, deep in the earth that was sealed by the Continuation Institute, above the cracked earth, the light of the stars from afar was projected. It illuminated the endless darkness, overlooking the strange light in the crack, and the stars in the sky brought new power. In the project engineering room, who knew how many scholars were shouting and roaring in excitement? What are you shouting for? Be quiet. The burly creator sat at the front and reprimanded coldly. His face was still wrapped in a layer of darkness that could not be removed. From time to time, a strange eye would open in the darkness and then disappear. Wushuan's curse was unable to break through his frame and leak out. That power had been preserved in the frame as a specimen. King Gert, who had sacrificed himself in the battle of the destructive elements, sat there and suppressed the overly lazy atmosphere in the control room. Don't forget your duty. Pay attention to the guidance. We don't have much time left. Don't let their hard work and sacrifice go to waste. What responded to him was a uniform shout. The scholars had already clenched their fists. They were ready to strike. It was as if an invisible hand had reached out from the dark dome. Under the light of the stars, the cracks that had appeared on the ground were healing. The Fourth Rift Valley Restoration Project had finally begun. The power from the fragment of Gaia, the origin left by Mother Earth, was returning to the present realm bit by bit. It was returning to this barren and dry land. The scars were gradually healing. Now, even though there were hundreds of thousands of miles of cracks healing rapidly every second, compared to the huge crack, the speed was still unbearably slow. The efficiency was too low. The fragment was too far away. And relying on the resonance between the two major mystic instruments, the power that could be transmitted back was too limited. Steady, steady. King Gert clenched his knee so tightly that it was almost as if he was going to crush it. He lay on the glass, widened his eyes, and stared at the crack that was gradually healing below. He kept repeating. It was unknown whether he was urging the young subordinates behind him or giving his blessings to the battle in the distance. However, the intermittent power that was transmitted over was simply too minuscule. After just a few minutes, there was a sudden roar. The ground groaned, and two brand new canyons split horizontally. What the hell? Hold your ground. Steady. What is the mixing team doing? Are they all dead? King Gert turned back and scolded angrily. The circuit of the mixing and decompression has been overloaded, sir. The scholar turned back and reported the transmission line was broken for 2 seconds, and it has only just been reopened. Hey, Niflheim. Is Niflheim still there? King Gert picked up the walkie-talkie and shouted, Speak. After a long silence, hoarse breathing came from the live channel. The injured creator stood at the edge of the crack, his palm holding up his frame. Just like that, he looked down at the crack that had almost swallowed him and the frontline base. He calmly replied, "Just a small disturbance, no problem." He said, "Continue." Now, the entire repair project of the crack was connected to the secret instrument in the distance. It looked like the repair of the crack, but in essence, it was the process of Gaia's fragments gradually returning to the present realm. Once it started, it would be a long and drawn-out project. The Continuation Academy had already bet on the restoration of the present realm. If it failed, not only would it take decades of effort, the 4 creators in charge of the frontline repair work, as well as hundreds of scholars, would probably be sucked into the crack and fall into the ruins of the kingdom of heaven. Continue. King Gert ordered again, his face expressionless. It hasn't stopped yet. Amidst the twinkling stars, countless laws descended once again. It was the burning souls in hell sending Gaia's fragments, bit by bit, to the present realm. Therefore, they couldn't stop. The project began again. At this moment, in the sea of fragments, a swaying and broken star finally couldn't bear the load and fell from the night sky. "Damn it, Golden Dawn," Weisher muttered expressionlessly. On the other side, a place that stood aloof from the world slowly rose in mocking laughter. Chapter 1149. With the fall of a star, another dim light slowly appeared at the end of the sky. It had no foundation, no reason, but it was rooted in the sea of stars like a malignant tumor mixing in the framework of the great mystic apparatus, Zarathustra. Then another one. As the star fell, the impurities that could not emit light seeped into the great mystic apparatus bit by bit. With the stolen light, they began to block the operation of the great mystic apparatus. Error notifications popped up from the panel floating in front of Weisher like a storm. Some kind of format that did not seem to be the framework and laws of the Creator, after passing through the identification program, parasitized the great mystic apparatus like vines, blocking the operation, causing contradictions, and even causing it to continue to seep in. The first to bear the brunt was the physics subdivision. Under the interference of the external laws, it almost instantly went into a state of shutdown. What the hell is this? When Weisher operated according to the manual and read the internal data through the verification program of the great mystic apparatus itself, he almost felt like his eyes were going blind. The first thing he saw was the patents and ideas of 60,000 perpetual motion machines. Then there were the previous papers on the discussion of biological magnetic fields and the development of superpowers, as well as the many laws derived from them, including telekinesis, mind reading, and the hot egg of will, and the quantum mechanics module in the worst hit area was stuffed with all kinds of strange results, such as quantum wave speed, quantum freckle removal, quantum time travel, quantum computer operations, quantum perpetual motion machines, quantum hot eggs. Forget about the perpetual motion machines and the F** king hot eggs. Can't you do anything? It was as if everything was immediately omnipotent after being stained with quantum at the core of quantum mechanics. Above the framework of Albert District, there were layers of darkness shrouding it, making it difficult to operate. As for the strange laws, such as the chemical energy district turning water into oil, and the whimsical innovations in the mathematics district that only made people feel the urge to pee, there were too many to count. Endless garbage and dregs, as if after years of ignorance and incompetence, the hooligans on the street suddenly received an apocalypse one day and were going to lead the world into a new era. And now, amidst the glorious stars in the temple built by the Creator, innumerable heretics began their own farce. Even if the self-inspection program of the great mystic apparatus was immediately activated, and the garbage that passed off as fish eyes were quickly cleaned up, there was an endless stream of them. Especially among the sublimators, there was a classic simple-minded person like Quafu, who completely believed what others said. Now, he had already picked up the quantum cultivation technology that fell from the sky and presented it to the Qing emperor. "Old madam, look at what I found." Then he was kicked from the top of Fusel. Fortunately, it was Quafu. Otherwise, anyone else would have been GG after being kicked down from the stratosphere like this. This wasn't the only place. Under the infiltration of the realm of discovery, countless strange phenomena were constantly appearing. Gravity went out of control, hurricanes wreaked havoc, countless strange mutations of plants, and even strange illusions like flying saucers emerged one after another. If it weren't for the 24 solar terms of Eastern Xia, the Almanac of America, the Pantheon, and the 6 paths of reincarnation, Huai sure doubted that the great mystery ritual would still be working. What was this? Since when did hell become so advanced? Soon, after smelling the stench that belonged to the Golden Dawn, Huai sure almost couldn't help but sneer. Sure enough, compared to the enemy, the heretics deserved to die the most. Not to mention the heretics that had become the enemy. They deserved to die twice, and they deserved to be hated twice. A bunch of trash. Why can't they just obediently roll into the trash can? Huai sure whispered softly. His fingers swept across the control panel of the great mystic apparatus. According to the settings in the Continuation Institute's instruction manual, the emergency measures were activated. God knows how many illusions those guys had made. They had even prepared for such a situation. Moreover, they had fully considered Huai Shi's IQ and thoughtfully made it a fool's button operation. Such a considerate arrangement really made Huai Shi not know whether to be moved or angry that the other party looked down on his level. Soon, the firewall from the Continuation Institute had finished loading in the great mystic apparatus's system. After that, Huai Shi didn't need to care anymore. It would automatically remove all hidden dangers and ensure the stability and safety of the great mystic apparatus. He could finally free up his hands to deal with those bastards who kept trying to show their existence. In theory, as the controller of the great mystic apparatus, with the verification of the Book of Destiny, Huai Shi directly obtained the highest authority and could do whatever he wanted. But after all, this wasn't his toy. In order to maintain the stability of the framework, he couldn't deliberately create a bug and directly create a black hole in the reality realm and throw it over. This kind of method of killing 1,000 enemies at the expense of 2,000 was too stupid. He didn't want to be shot to death by the Continuation Institute more than 10 times after the bet was over. He could only change the method. Vice-Chancellor, can the dragon summoning flute still be used? He asked bluntly. Isaac was taken aback for a moment before he immediately understood what he meant. Madame Chen is only equipped with a prototype of the first generation. Although it can theoretically achieve the same output and power as the main cannon of the Sky Fortress, we don't have such conditions right now. Don't worry, there are plenty of conditions. Huai Shi calmly replied. If there aren't any conditions, we can still create them, right? Before he finished his sentence, the revolving stars scattered their brilliance, illuminating the massive white tower that soared into the sky in the heart of the reality realm. The law of the infinite framework extended and descended, connected, even for the great mystic apparatus rooted in the 3 pillars. In order to unleash such a massive power, it needed a physical existence to contain and bear it. But now, what physical existence could compare to the same pedigree and the same specifications of the ivory tower that had included this possibility at the beginning of its design? In the long early days, when Huai Shi was constantly jumping left and right behind the enemy lines, the Vice-Chancellor had already padded all the outposts and transit bases belonging to the celestial genealogy throughout the Gaia fragment. All the missions of receiving the enemy were given to Madame Chen, and all the missions of harassment were given to Huai Shi. A large group of ascendants from the ivory tower were constantly erecting the beacon of the ivory tower on the land with jaw-dropping efficiency. Now, Huaishur, who held the authority of the great mystic apparatus, would be crazy not to use this set of facilities. At this moment, the stars in the void bloomed as the rotation of heaven and earth tilted towards the white tower in the center. Endless sapphira gathered from the reality realm's domain as it unceremoniously extracted the miracle and power from the fragment. Using hundreds of outposts as a transit point, it followed the complicated routes to gather at the center. Human intelligence barrier, ivory tower. The tower trembled violently as the pure white color peeled off from the outermost layer, revealing countless flowing brilliance. At this moment, the chief affairs officer, Simmons, who was sitting in the central control center, could already feel his blood pressure constantly rising. Slow down, slow down. He wiped his cold sweat as he shouted at Huaishur's route. Do you want to blow up the entire ivory tower? Don't worry, I've already calculated it. This amount won't blow it up. He gave a casual reply, completely unconcerned about the dangerous nature he seemed to have exposed. A large amount of sapphira gathered in the central furnace, causing countless connected devices to emit sparks. Overload operation. Yes, yes, yes. This is it. Brat, you're awesome. Madam Chin shouted excitedly. At the top of the white tower, Anubis projection frantically extracted the power provided by the entire reality realm's framework, causing the entire armor to burn red. In the cockpit, the ascendant shrouded in flames grinned as he gripped the control stick tightly. It was as if he was holding the scepter of death. Push it all the way to the end. Data change detected. Nether River sequence activated. Dragon summoning flute, form switch, annihilation, echo, reversal, destruction torrent, activate. At this moment, in Anubis' hand, the silhouette of the dragon summoning flute quietly collapsed and turned into dust. The dazzling light gathered into a solid form and extended out from it. The giant cannon that looked like it was made of light extended straight, forward like a sword of destruction, aiming at the location of the Golden Dawn from afar. In the direction of the cannon, all the air was squeezed away by an invisible pressure, forming a vacuum that extended for hundreds of miles. The light of destruction was brewing, waiting for the final command. This is what you want, right? Huaishur smiled and gave the command to fire. Come, let's have some fun together. Pa! A soft sound echoed between heaven and earth again. It was as if a champagne bottle called the end had been opened, spraying out light and dreamy bubbles. Literally, the destruction torrent spewed out from the cannon of the dragon's summoning flute. The support from the great arcana had added almost half of the reality realm's power to it, forging the fleeting light of destruction. Now, the concentrated light was converging forward. It easily crossed the boundary between the reality realm and hell, passing through hurricanes, torrential rain, and even mountains. It swept past the mountains of the Eternity Group, and the terrifying aftershock alone burned half of the mountains into lava, ignoring the mournful screams and curses from the unlucky Eternity Group. The light of destruction continued. The light of destruction was still moving forward, gathering the light from the stars, the origin substance that had undergone a qualitative change to the extreme turned into pure light and heat. The heat of the entire human world was cast in such a violent way to a place that was isolated from the world, causing that empty space to instantly collapse. Cracks continuously appeared in the Book of Law, and flames spewed out from them, igniting the cover and pages. At the top of the damaged tower, Alistair coldly stared at the light that was whistling towards him. He didn't resist at all, allowing Huaishur's light of vengeance to completely engulf him. Just like that, he watched helplessly as Huaishur destroyed everything that he had created in the early stages. This was the final outcome of being an abandoned pawn. All of his painstaking efforts, all of his results, and all of his plans were buried in this belated light. However, at the very last moment, the shattered face sighed, silently, the last murmur, leaving behind the last words that led to the disaster. Where we are, there is no God. We are alone. The moment the introduction was recited, everything fell silent. Amidst the spreading flames and radiance, the ruined body collapsed. Tender, aged, charming, hoarse, low, resounding, countless voices rang out, praising in unison. "We are for the large group," he said. "We are for the army of 10,000. In that broken body, a total of 666 different soul compositions transcended and bathed in the light and heat that destroyed everything. They allowed the place that was isolated from the world to be completely destroyed in the torrent of destruction. On the chessboard, the card that belonged to Alistair was also enveloped in flames. It burned the old form. A new form was revealed here. The chosen one, Alistair, XXI. An old and stooped figure slowly rose from the dissipating flames. He opened his arms and embraced everything that was full of strife and chaos. He allowed the terrifying firepower of the dragon summoning flute to ignite him again. In the heavy flames, a whisper of hatred came from the broken body. "I am the world." Chapter 1150. The sudden change shocked many people. Regardless of whether it was Weishur's sudden ruthlessness, the destruction of the isolated place, or even Alistair's death before anyone could react, the ruler was restored again. But was it restoration or rebirth? Or was it some kind of replacement? It had to be known that whether it was the great arcana or other probing mirrors, or even the detection methods in hell, at that moment, they all came to the same conclusion: dead. Without a doubt, it was impossible for Alistair to survive after taking a direct hit from the dragon's summoning flute. Even the dark sage, King Frostmoon of the Sea of Thunder, did not dare to say that he would have a good ending if he took a direct hit from that cannon. Now that the isolated place was in pieces, and he was covered in wounds, no matter how one looked at it, Alistair was already completely dead. Then, who was this person in front of them? A second Alistair. Even if his face was completely different from before, there was something in his bones that was the same. That strange and dark aura had not changed at all. Instead, as his face aged, it became more ferocious and fierce. For a moment, everyone's gazes swept across the cards on the chessboard. When they saw the mysterious number behind the name combined with his words, they seemed to have a slight realization. XXI Roman numeral 21 inches the tarot cards. It corresponded to the world that symbolized Wanxiang perfection and imperfection. In other words, the card with the number 16 from before was the tower of the tarot card sequence 17. If this was the case, then all the previous rumors and mysteries about Alistair could be confirmed. Within the Golden Dawn, the name Alistair did not correspond to a person, but to an entire group and organization. There should be a total of 22 members in the tarot card sequence. But if there was a small arcana deck made up of 56 cards in addition to the big arcana deck, then the number would be even more, but no matter what, it was enough. I think that the turn-based system is no longer suitable for this version. Weishur coldly glanced at the proud face thousands of miles away and flicked his index finger. This kind of doll game, let's stop here. It was like the lunch boxes prepared by the crew. Eating it once is enough. Take it and leave quickly. What was the meaning of shamelessly staying on the stage? If you don't have enough money, then don't bring your whole family to the banquet. Every time someone started to be undignified, someone else had to stand up and help you be dignified for once. Now, when that bent index finger flicked out from the suppression of the thumb, A thunderous roar burst forth from the starry sky above his head. It was as if the stars were enraged, beating the heavenly drum. Before anyone could react, a dazzling streak of light descended from the sky. In an instant, it crossed thousands of kilometers and pierced through the old man's face. It tore apart his shameless smile, severed his head, and incinerated his worthless soul. The reborn ruler trembled violently, and his head disappeared without a trace. Decapitation. Behind him, in the collapsed mountains, a scorch mark that stretched for thousands of miles was nailed into the deepest part of the rock stratum. Sword of Virtue. The slender blade had already been nailed into the iron rock, burning and buzzing. Dead silence. The battle in the sky froze at this moment. Not only the dwarf king, but also the snake of the bloody sea couldn't help but look back. They were shocked by the sudden attack and the destructive power contained in it. They couldn't understand it, but they were full of fear. It was as if they had heard the gunshot in the distance in the dense forest. When? What happened? Even the king of the heretics, who was in a stalemate with the sword saint at the broken border, raised his eyelids slightly. Soon, he withdrew his gaze without interest. Wow, sword immortal. Only Kwafu, who had climbed to the top of Fusang with binoculars, shouted and looked back at the Green Emperor excitedly. Old lady, do we have such a thing in Domxia? Yes, of course. The Green Emperor glanced at him helplessly, as if he was looking at his own silly child. Really? Kwafu was even more surprised. Why didn't I know about it? You don't need to know. You can do it. The Green Emperor lowered his eyes slightly and sensed the 24 solar terms distributed in the realm of reality, as well as the aftermath of the fierce light that had crossed the realm of reality and flew into hell. He couldn't help but sigh. Just pick up your fishing rod and throw it out. As long as you throw it fast enough, far enough, and strong enough, the destructive power will be stronger. Even a brick can knock down a star. Not to mention that kid's most famous origin form equipment. Now, Huaishi's finger flicked again. The stars in the sky hummed. The sword of virtue wedged into the rock disappeared, and the flames of the axe of fury had crossed thousands of miles and chopped into Alistair's rapidly regenerating body. From the top to the bottom, it split. After breaking through that insignificant restriction, the flames that scattered across the sky drew an arc and finally fell towards the mountains in the southwest. In the roar of the earth, another factory of the Eternal World Group was smashed into pieces. It was like a meteorite. This time, Kwafu finally understood something, and his eyes widened in disbelief. That was an arrow? That's right. Even if it was an axe, a sword, a hammer, a spear, or something else, it didn't matter. In essence, there was nothing magical about it. It was just a materialization of one's own origin form equipment, and used it as an arrow or a bullet, accelerating it to an unimaginable degree in a short period of time. In the end, this power was completely unleashed in the form of kinetic energy. On the enemy's body. Was this even possible? Now, as Huaishir flicked his finger again, the silhouette of the Spear of Compassion appeared among the stars. The solemn blade of the spear spun around in an invisible binding, throwing out its own distorted silhouette to the outside world. It was difficult to distinguish its state, and in Huaishir's hand, the light of countless stars intertwined like a string. Taut. This change made countless scholars gasp in amazement. After only a short period of time, he had already figured out the most suitable way to use it. With the support of the laws of physics, he created a structure that was comparable to an accelerator out of thin air. After forging the origin form into iron, he used the entire Zarathustra as a bow. In order to accommodate all the frameworks and laws, the empty buffer area was specially left as an acceleration space. He borrowed the power of the Great Arcana's framework to expand and grow as a string. after accumulating to the limit. He released it instantly. Now, the power of the operation of the stars in the sky was entrusted to the spear. The burning steel released a dazzling light. Roar! Roar! In the Chalcedony Hall, Tangi held an ice cream in front of the TV and raised her eyebrows slightly. The illegally modified antenna was continuously intercepting the top-secret signals of the Continuation Academy and conveying the scene inside the chessboard to the huge screen. Every single detail could be seen clearly. TSK, TSK, TSK. Should I say that it's good luck or good comprehension? Tongji bit her spoon and murmured softly, "Although I've been secretly cultivating him since a long time ago, if he can learn this way of using it without a teacher, he's only one step away from the final stage." She seemed to be happy and emotional. She didn't say anything else. With the spoon in her mouth and humming a song, Tangi held her chin and looked at the side profile on the screen. A silent smile, and in the chessboard, the blazing light flew out again. In the blink of an eye, it crossed a distance of thousands of miles. It easily chiseled a hole through Alistair's broken body, as if it was bombarded by a giant cannon, and the bent skeleton welcomed destruction. At this moment, as Weischer stretched out his 10 fingers, the stars in the sky rotated, and the mighty roar rose and fell one after another, intertwining into a dirge of destruction. With the infinite power from the great arcana, using the guidance of this free ride, the terrifying destructive power above the electromagnetic cannons continued to descend from the sky. The burning steel converged into rain. It sprinkled down one after another. Everywhere it passed, not only the Golden Dawn, but also the blood river and bone path of the fallen country, the dark clouds and storms of the Sea of Thunder, and even the arcana constructed by the jesters, all collapsed under the spear from the present realm. But in the endless barrage of firepower, Alistair's body was constantly regenerating. The scattered blood and bones seemed to be pulled by an invisible force, and no matter how great the destruction was, it couldn't completely eradicate his existence. But this tenacity made a distant sneer in the wind. "That's it. You went through so much trouble to change your body, but in the end, you became a target?" Weischer asked curiously. "It can't be, it can't be, it can't be. It's the great Golden Dawn. Bring out something real." As the sharp blade pierced through, the old face appeared gloomy. A hoarse voice sounded. "How long do you want to watch the show, Woodman?" "It doesn't matter how long I watch the show." Woodman's joking voice sounded. "The key is who is unlucky, isn't it?" Even so, a huge pair of wings still appeared out of thin air from the haze in the sky. As it spread out, the gray fog gathered out of thin air and turned into a pair of wings so wide that it would make anyone's jaws drop as it enveloped Alistair. It was supposed to be protection. When all the streams of light fell from the sky, once they got close to the grayish-black wing, they began to slow down at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was as if the space was being stretched endlessly. In the end, in the invisible trek, they gradually lost the kinetic energy attached to it and burned out silently. The grayish-black mist surged and revealed Woodman's face. There was also his pitch-black long hair and eyes. He was dressed in a pure white robe and was as solemn as a god, but his smile was full of malice. "Phew, I haven't appeared in this appearance for a long time." The solidified person raised his palm and looked at his 5 fingers. He sneered. "What is this? A portrait of a deceased person, when he was alive?" Behind him, the mist behind him was constantly changing, constantly alternating between the wings, flames, and even broken iron pieces. It slowly spread out, causing everything to flow under the gray wing. "At least, I'm temporarily alive." He raised his head and took a deep breath of air that he hadn't felt for a long time. But in his heart, there was still the tearing pain from when he was on the verge of death. It had long been engraved in his memory and soul, and could not be eliminated. It had been a long time since he appeared on the chessboard in the same state as before he died 70 years later. The solidified person, who had been killed by Russell himself, was reborn under the reproduction of the records of events. This was Woodman, who had not been reduced to a virus or a meme, the creator who had been nurtured by the utopia in the past. At the same time, he was also a level 5 sublimator. At this moment, under the huge gray wings, all kinetic energy was eliminated, whether it was the bombardment from Huaishur, the moonlight shot out from the Pantheon of Rome, or even the pillars of fire sprinkled down from the solar almanac. Unlike Bennett's Seal of the Abyss, it was full of spiritual operation, forming an invisible domain. The deeper inside, the slower things moved. In the end, it was almost stagnant. Just like that, Woodman coldly looked at the sword that was approaching him without limit, but could not cross the final distance. He snorted mockingly. In the end, it's just a little trick that can't be put on the table. It's just like that. He stretched out his hand and pointed lightly, casually destroying the sword of virtue that had burned into an empty shell. But before that smile could even spread, he saw the night sky that suddenly lit up. There were also stars that multiplied. Then they multiplied again. In Huaishur's hands. Is that so? A distant greeting came from the wind, full of curiosity. If that's the case, then if the number is a little more, it shouldn't be a problem, right? At this moment, in Huaishur's hands, countless iron lights jumped out continuously. With the terrifying productivity of the secret apparatus, he did not even need to do it himself to form a terrifying amount of iron. Countless pieces of iron rose into the sky and burned, filling the sea of stars with the brilliance of iron. It illuminated Woodman's gradually stiffening smile. Then, as Huaishur pressed down with his 5 fingers, they generously sprinkled on the earth and embraced all things. To rebel against everything, to be cut into pieces. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.